What's up, guys? Welcome back to another live stream. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Cam Waters, passionate Christian and director of the incredible film exploring Jesus' legacy, Cowspiracy. Cam, welcome back to the channel.
Thanks, David. Stoked to be here.
Good to have you back, man. So we're here to talk about Charlie Kirk. And some of you, obviously, there's been a lot of news and a lot of coverage of what happened, which we're going to get into as well a little bit. But our main reason for doing this specific video is since what happened to Charlie Kirk, my video on him that I posted about 4 months ago about his deleted debate with a vegan, about 300,000 or 400,000 people found that video over the last week, just over a week. And a lot of people are asking a lot of questions. A lot of people are showing a lot of support. A lot of people giving some heartfelt sort of, comments and memorial type of thing as well. It's been a bit of a whirlwind seeing all these comments fly in and all these new people kind of discovering this debate and discovering the channel. And so I thought it might be a nice idea for us to come together with Cam, who is like a bit of a resident Bible expert, and to go through the video and some of the things that I couldn't quite do justice, because Charlie made some biblical and religious arguments against veganism in that debate, and I did my best. Cam's taught me well, but I thought it'd be great to bring Cam in and to dig into that a little bit deeper. So yeah, Cam, thanks for agreeing to come on and do this. I think it's going to be quite interesting, and I think you're uniquely placed to talk about this with making Cowspiracy, but there's more to that story, isn't there? Why don't you give us a bit of an idea? Because when I asked you about this, you actually said yes, not just because of the biblical stuff, but there's more of a story for you here. It's more personal for you as well, isn't it? So maybe let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So the issue with Charlie is ultimately such a big thing. It's buzzing everywhere, and it's so tragic. But it deeply affected me at a personal level because my little brother was actually murdered at gunpoint 2 years ago. And it was on his 16th birthday on August 30th. And that just happened. And so my family, for the last 2 years, August is a really tough month, especially the end of August going into September. And so we were processing some grief and going through all that. And the next thing you know, you see this happening broadcast across the internet everywhere. And needless to say, it caused a lot of, just challenging moments for my family. I'm still walking with my mom through it right now. And so I want to lead with saying that I'm very sensitive and empathetic to the tragedy itself. And nothing that I'm saying here by any means is to attack Charlie the person. I actually feel so much sympathy and just heartache for the whole situation. But it's more so to engage the argument, which is what Charlie loved to do. And so love him or hate him, wherever anyone stands on that spectrum, the one thing that we can all agree on is he loved to debate. He loved to challenge ideas. And that's all that I want to do. And in fact, I had intentions to go to a Charlie event and challenge him on this debate after the debate that he did with our friend Michael, who we're going to be responding to here. Mm-hmm. And Michael and I connected with Michael after this debate to ask him about the process of getting the mic and getting there to actually have a conversation with him, because I wanted to address these very issues. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And now it can't happen, which is really, really sad. But I think this is the best thing that we can do to really continue this conversation. And just so that everyone, to further express the, sensitivity to it all, is even Michael, who debated Charlie, he was the one that texted me first about the incident that happened. Mm-hmm. And his text was, "Hey, man, we need to pray for his family." And so I think really the side of the argument that we're going to be sitting on is one of full compassion for Charlie's situation, his family's situation, but also another type of a compassion that we're going to talk about with these arguments that we're going to engage around scripture and animals.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, and we were fully on board with this. Is why that's why you agreed to do it, is that I was all the same as you, to say that we're not going to come out here and dunk on a guy who's not around to defend himself. No matter what disagreements we had, no matter what you believe about him, he sat there and said, with a sign that literally said "Prove me wrong," and ultimately, you know, that's what we're going to do. But it's not by any means, like I said, some sort of dunk type deal. It would the best case scenario for having this conversation would have been, as you said, in front of him at one of these events. That's no longer an option because of the tragedy and because of what happened. And but no, I think I agree. I totally agree with you. I think it's important to do this respectfully, unlike many, unfortunately, out there who've chosen to go a different route. I'm definitely not on that road. I think we can be respectful, we can respectfully disagree, and we can actually, you know, we can look at the things that were said and we can show why they're wrong, and that would hopefully, you know, move people to changing their position. And that's what he always claimed he wanted to do. That was his whole shtick. That was his whole thing. So we're going to make this quite a clean, respectful video, just talking about the, you know, what was said and why we believe it was wrong, and hopefully encouraging people to make better decisions for animals, which is, you know, that's what we're in this for. That's what we're here for. And so I will say, one more thing before we get into it, and just for anyone who's wondering, this is the video that we're going to be looking at. You might remember it if you've seen it. It's Charlie Kirk deleted this debate with a vegan. I posted this up. This is a debate that is no longer on his channel. It was removed. And it was unlisted, I think. I think if you go through some playlists, maybe you can find it. But it was taken off of his public page, if that makes sense. This video pulled in 718,000 views and 21,000 likes. It's one of my biggest videos. And about roughly half of that was just over the last week. So people are clearly, you know, out there looking for Charlie Kirk content right now and trying to get a bit of a grasp on what he believed and, you know, counterpoints and all this sort of stuff. So that's what we're trying to... you know, that's what we're going to go for today and dig a bit deeper into it. Now, to further stress the point that this is not some weird cash grab or some sort of trying to capitalize on a bloody assassination, as I'm sure some people are going to be wondering if that's what's going on here. Just to further push that point, all of your donations today, so if you send a donation with a super chat, if you send a donation with a Streamlabs donation, and all the ad revenue for this video, I'm donating it to an animal sanctuary. It's my favorite animal sanctuary and one that really needs the help. But they all do, but they really do need the help. It's called Kurza Lapka over in Poland. They specialize in looking after specifically disabled birds that have been rescued from farms. So they've got disabled ducks, they've got disabled chickens, I believe a disabled turkey. They literally build wheelchairs for them so they can walk around and all this sort of amazing stuff. And they, you know, these are birds that, you know, not many people in the world are equipped to take care of this type of problem, and they do. So that's what we're going to do with all the money raised from today. So guys, be sure to send through super chats and Streamlabs donations through the link, which is over. It's around. Go in the chat. It's pinned in the comment and it's in the description as well. So be sure to send that through and let's help some of these ducks and let's help some animals while we're doing this today. I think that's everything I wanted to say before we dive in. Should we get into it, Cam?
Let's do it.
All right, sweet. So this video, we're going to cut out all the parts that are not relevant to this discussion. Like Cam and I really want to get into the Bible stuff and the Christianity stuff. The reason being, a lot of people had a lot of questions about that specifically. Barely any questions about anything else, actually. Most of the pushback is, didn't Jesus eat fish? Things like that, you know, but God put them here for us. And what about dominion? And what about, that's been where people have been really pushing back. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to play the video and we're going to pause whenever my face pops up on the screen, because we're not going to have me react and then me react to me reacting and all this stuff. We're going to pause then and we're going to talk whenever I pop up on the screen. So let's kick into it. And Cam, just let me know if you can hear this. And everyone let me know if you can hear this. It's been a while since I've streamed, so
sounds good.
Do me a favor. You guys are my supervisors.
And I believe that we were designed by God not needing to eat meat.
What scripture are you referencing?
Genesis 1:29.
Right, and it's you mean the scripture says God gave dominion over the animals?
No, the one that
of the earth?
says, "I've given you every seed-bearing plant, fruit, and tree on this earth, and for you, that shall be meat."
Right, but again, just to continue a little further, to be clear, in the Noahic covenant, it does allow for animals.
I'm aware. So that, after the flood,
and just to be clear, doesn't the law give guidance on how to kill animals?
So I'm going to pause there because he kind of bounced over a point, kind of gish galloped a little bit, didn't he? Kind of,
Yeah.
What do they call it? Tap dancing. where we were on one point and then we moved. So he brought up that thing about the Noahic covenant, and then he said that was after the flood, and then he got cut off. So do you want to elaborate a bit on that and help us, I don't know, fill those gaps in there?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I want to touch on Genesis 1:29, which is what Michael led with. And what's interesting about this verse is that I'm pretty confident in saying your average Christian doesn't even realize this verse exists in the Bible. And I didn't for a long time in my journey as a follower of Jesus, being raised in the Bible Belt in the deep American South, right? Never once did I hear a preacher read this verse on stage. And I did have, through the path of like some of these creationists and people that take the science of the Bible literally with the creation narrative and the earth being created in 7 days, they'll often talk about this idea of a vegetarian or a vegan prehistory with Adam and Eve and all of this. But even when they do, often they don't read that verse. They just explain it. It's the most bizarre thing. So in some ways, I want to lead by saying, Charlie clearly doesn't even really know what he's referring to when he brings up that verse. He jumps to dominion because he thinks, Genesis, dominion, God gave us animals to control, basically, is what the average Christian believes most of the time. And I just want to lead by that. I don't even think this is like Charlie's fault, right? Just as much as it wasn't my fault for so long, being raised in a tradition that just doesn't address this issue. So to make that clear, in the first chapter of Genesis, the opening of the whole story of the greatest or most sold, most popular book of all time starts with a vegan paradise. And it's very clear in such that in Genesis 1:26 through 28, God does grant dominion so that humans have dominion over animals and the earth. But this word dominion, without getting into all the details, we can if we want to later with more time, but it essentially means stewardship. It's the same way a parent has dominion over their child as God or a creator is having dominion over us, which isn't a license to abuse, kill, or let alone eat. And we know this is clear because in the literal following verse after dominion is granted, that's 1:26 through 28, 1:29, God prescribes a plant-based diet. It says, herbs and fruits shall be yours for food, speaking to the humans. So we know that dominion, which Charlie immediately jumped to, has no room for abusing, exploiting animals for really any purpose, but especially not food, because it's clearly demonstrated in the following verse. I don't know if you want to speak on that, but I can continue.
Sure, yeah. I was just going to say, like, I think from what I understand, at least from people I've spoken to, it's that the idea that animals are worth less or that aren't that are just resources. It's not only driven by the Bible. It's also driven by, is it Aquinas? Is it Thomas Aquinas who said that animals don't have souls? And he's the person who said they don't have souls. I always thought that was in the Bible, and I only found out like a year or so ago that actually it's not in the Bible at all. But if you ask a Christian, do animals have souls? Most of them will say yes, and they will probably think that it's in the Bible, won't they? That's where they think that teaching comes from, but it's not at all. It comes from a non-biblical source, which means it should be scrutinized heavily, a belief like that, right?
Exactly. And not only does it not originate in the Bible, it doesn't even necessarily originate with Thomas Aquinas either, because Thomas Aquinas was building on the theories of Aristotle. Thomas Aquinas was a big time Aristotle fan. And Aristotle was an outlier in the whole school of philosophy, from the greats of Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras, you name it, who all condemned the use and abuse of animals for food or really any purpose. But Aristotle flipped the script on that and began to create this hierarchical notion of the fact that they are less intelligent than us or have X, Y, Z qualities. We can therefore use and abuse them. He was the one that jumped out on that, and Thomas Aquinas built on that, brought it into the church. Whereas on the flip side, to your point, in the scripture, it's very clear that animals are endowed with the same ruach and nefesh, which are two words for soul, spirit, breath of life, the distinguishing factor that human beings have over plant life and rocks and other things within the world.
Right.
And not only that, it goes a step further in the writings of Solomon, who was said in the scripture to be the wisest man who ever lived. God granted him one gift if he chose the right gift, and Solomon asked to be wiser, and so God said, "Oh, that's a great thing to want." So he gave him this wisdom.
So he's like the Reed Richards of the the Christian world.
Exactly. And so Solomon wrote in his work Ecclesiastes, a book that's in our canonical text in the Bible, if you open it right now, in chapter 3, verses 18 through 19, he says that man has no advantage over the animals, which is this true dominion stewardship idea. We don't have an advantage over them that we can use against them. In fact, he goes on to say that just as an animal dies, so dies humans. What happens to one happens to the other. And he says both of them share the ruach, the breath of life. Now, a lot of our modern translations will translate to both have the same breath, but it's really this word, this deeper word that means breath of life, spirit, soul, right? So, the scriptures don't support the ideas of Thomas Aquinas and this notion that animals don't have souls.
And that's really important. One thing he said at the end here, where he got cut off, is when he said that the Noahic covenant gives permission to kill animals, and then Michael here, the vegan on the right hand side, guys, he says, but that's after the fall, and then he gets cut off. So what is he referring to here then? Why does Charlie? I don't think he did that on purpose, but he moved the conversation forward without really fully, finishing that point. What do you think Michael was about to elaborate on there when he said, but that was after the fall?
Yeah, so this idea in Genesis 9 is what many will often jump to in defense of animal consumption from a biblical perspective. And it's the idea that after the flood, up until the flood, humanity, or at least the righteous of humanity, were vegan. They didn't touch animals for food in that way at all. And Noah, right, in fact, the one who rescues all the animals, he doesn't even necessarily rescue humans, which is interesting. He rescues all of the animal life onto his ark, and he survives this cataclysm, right? And after he exits the ark, there's a scripture in Genesis 9 where it says that God then grants Noah, everything that moves shall be yours for food, just as I gave you the plants. Now I give you everything that moves. Now there's a whole distinction there with what it's actually saying in the Hebrew. But before even jumping to that, what I feel Michael was probably going to touch on is, regardless of the minutia that we can get into, this is a concession for a fallen world, meaning there was a paradise, and in that paradise, there was no killing unnecessarily for our needs like food. There was an abundance of nutrition and everything that we needed in the plant kingdom. However, man's folly, misuse, sin, however you want to categorize it, depending on your worldview, led to a world that didn't have that same, respect for life. But there were the few righteous who did, and Noah was one of them. So at a certain point, this humanity stretched the earth beyond its resources, beyond its means, etc. And this flood happens. And afterwards, and again, too, I know there's probably people listening to this that just don't take scripture seriously at all and think, God is not real, atheism, etc. But even with that worldview, we know science has shown that there were massive cataclysms that happened in ancient times right around the period which this is referring to. So there's something going on at minimum with like collective trauma across all societies. The Ugaritic texts talk about this, you name it. So after this flood happens, the way the story records it is that Noah then is granted to eat every moving thing. The idea that I think Michael was getting to is that this was a concession for a time when there's nothing to eat anymore. The entire world, or at minimum, the area where this occurred was wiped clean. There's there's no plants, there's let alone even topsoil or anything that you can properly grow nutrition. So there's got to be some way to make a concession to survive. It's a survival situation.
Well, it's like an extension of it's interesting actually. It kind of echoes what how most vegans think as well, in that you're gonna. I mean, obviously, you'll find some vegans who will say that they'll go and say, "Oh, I would go and try and get somebody living, out in the Brazilian rainforest to go vegan." But I think most people who really think really hard about this would say, "Well, look, I think in survival situations we do all sorts of bad things to each other. Never mind to to animals as well, but to each other, and." Ultimately, it's hard to judge people by what they do when they have to survive, right? I mean, you can for sure, and you can make judgments, but ultimately, it's a different scenario. You do a lot of things that you would never do in day-to-day life to survive, and I think that's very logical. I mean, you don't need to believe in the Bible or Christianity to look at that and say, well, yeah, that's pretty basic stuff. And I would say I wanted to tag on what you said there about there will definitely be some people in the chat or in the stream right now who they're actually being quite polite so far, the atheists, if you are here. So I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. But if you are here, just bear in mind that I've said stuff like this before. I've said, what is it? Who gives a crap about your Sky Daddy and all your silly Christian mumbo jumbo and your Bible? Who cares? I don't care about any of it. I used to say that all the time, and none of it matters. I used to say that all the time until I realized that the entire Western world was built on the basis of the ethics and the morals from Judeo-Christian values. And people, whether they know it or not, a lot of people literally do what they do and believe what they believe with that as some sort of basis, whether it was their mum who taught them or their grandparents or their grandparents, etc. And so I think it is important, even as an atheist, to understand where people's beliefs most likely derive from. And when they do fall back on religion, specifically Christianity in this case, it's good to have someone like Cam here so that you can, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, you can, or at least give them a bit of a notion, send them on a bit of a path of questioning, maybe send them to Cam's, pages, Cowspiracy, and read this and read that and actually have a good think about this versus you kind of not being able to deal with it very well or trying to get away from it when ultimately it's, a lot of people base their belief of right or wrong on biblical teaching. So I do think there's a lot of use for this. So again, Cam, I appreciate you coming on. Let's
absolutely.
Should we crack on or go for it? I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, I want to add to that. We actually addressed this point very quickly in the film Cowspiracy.
Right.
In that, not only is it our moral and ethical frameworks in the Western world are intrinsically built in with this ancient Jewish or modern Christian version of this faith are built into our moral and ethical system. It's also the legal system, our politics, our monetary system. I mean, in God we trust is literally on the dollar bill. So it's all around us with heavy, influential decision makers and systems that run the world. So it's really important that we address the underlying foundations of what is actually being said and some misinterpretations that have happened along the way.
Definitely. Now let's dive in for some rest of this video. If you're just joining now, notice we had a little bump of people popping in. Welcome everybody who's just popped in. We're reacting to a deleted debate from Charlie Kirk that was a couple months ago that I did a reaction to, and we're reanalyzing it, but only the parts where he uses Christian arguments to defend not being a vegan or to attack veganism. And then we've got our resident Christian expert, director of Cowspiracy, an incredible film that explores Jesus's legacy and uncovers a bunch of stuff that you would never imagine. It's wild. You should go watch that at Cowspiracy.com. Cam's here. Cam is the director. And we're going to crack on with a little more of these arguments. Coming up, we've got Jesus ate fish, though. So what's that about? He also fed people with fish. So again, what's that about? And I think Charlie makes a few more comments as well. But the fish one is definitely one people are ready to are hoping for a bit of an answer to, because that really doesn't make sense. If Jesus was about helping animals, why would he eat fish and feed people fish, right? But we'll get to that. Let's see where we go from here.
Could I
like
also
how to kill animals.
Oh, yep. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to wrap one last point on there really quickly. That because I mentioned that Noah said that Noah was allowed to eat every moving thing, and I did want to clear that up. That even if we take forget the survival situation, whatever, the Hebrew word there is a word remus in Hebrew, which literally means bugs. It's a separate category from cattle, fish, and birds, the things that we commonly eat today from animal agriculture. It's 100% birds and sometimes means reptiles, which isn't kosher. So it most likely didn't mean that in that context. So the Genesis 9 reference that everyone brings up, well, God gave us everything that moves to eat. I often throw that back and say to everyone who's worried about, the World Economic Forum feeding us the bugs, they want us to eat the bugs,
you would eat the bugs?
You will eat the bugs. Technically, if you're throwing out Genesis 9 as a justification, then you're doing the same thing. You just don't know it. You're advocating for bug eating. And then the last thing is Noah does go on later in that verse, and Noah commits an animal sacrifice. There's reasons that I won't get into why I don't even believe that's authentic to the text. But if we take it at face value, Noah also immediately after that plants a vineyard and makes a bunch of wine and gets drunk, which so I don't think any of this. God's really angry about the sacrifice and has a whole ramble and rant about how man is evil. So it's not a good thing that's happening in Genesis 9. Let's just put it that way.
Great, man. It's always great to have you on. You're an you're a Bible encyclopedia. You are the Bible, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. Like you know everything. It's crazy.
I definitely probably read it way too much, but I enjoy it. So it's okay.
If the world, have you seen that book of Eli? That would be you. You would be that in that film. Like just
I love
everyone would be like fighting you, basically trying to get it out of you. You'd be the one man left who knows the entire Bible. All right, cool. Let's crack on then. Right, let's go back a little bit.
And just to be clear, doesn't the law?
Okay, so it was just here. He's just
again, just to continue a little further, to be clear, in the Noahic covenant, it does allow for animals.
I'm aware. So after the flood,
and just to be clear, doesn't the law give guidance on how to kill animals, like how to kill animals in certain ways? The Bible is explicitly pro meat eating, so much so that they would kill an animal as a sacrifice to God, or kill the fatted calf in celebration of something.
I mean, when Jesus came, he ended the sacrifice.
Okay, so again, a couple claims Charlie made there. The Bible is explicitly pro-meat. It teaches you how to kill animals, and they did animal sacrifices as celebrations. Michael responds, well, Jesus ended all of that. Cam, you want to chip in?
First of all, kudos to Michael, man. What a great, just getting straight to the point with that response. I mean, you can really just end it there for Christians, especially because the average Christian knows that you've got the, in their eyes, the Old Testament, which is the Hebrew Bible for Jews, and the New Testament. And the New Testament is Jesus. And the New Testament is what we're in. It's the new covenant. None of that stuff matters. So all of these laws about how to kill animals, it doesn't even matter anyways to the current Christian faith. So great answer from Michael on that regard. But to take it a step further, he says that the Bible is the most pro-meat book there is. Now, interestingly, I think he contradicts that point later in this video, if I remember correctly. But regardless, what I always tell people is the exact opposite. And I believe that my position has more evidence to support it. And that is every Christian that comes up on this debate, oftentimes when I'm faced with rebuttals, they respond to me by saying, you're cherry picking scripture to support your position that you don't want to kill animals or that we shouldn't eat animals or whatever, right? Well, the idea of cherry picking implies that I'm taking something out of context to support my thesis, and I'm taking this one little clip. When in fact, the exact opposite happens, because when you support meat eating or flesh consumption with the Bible, why? Because what is the greatest context of scripture one can take? Literally the beginning of the book to the end of the book. That's full context. And the Bible starts in a pacifist, peaceful, nonviolent, vegan garden paradise. And it ends in the prophetic kingdom of heaven, which Jesus came to establish, where not only are humans vegan again, as Revelation 22:2 states that we return to eating the fruits of the trees and the herbs, etc., Revelation 21:4 says there will be no more death, no more tears, no more pain. But it's very explicit that even the animals, carnivorous animals, stop killing each other as well. With this lion will lay with the lamb analogy, the child will lay with the serpent, the bull will eat straw, or the ox will eat straw. Or, I'm sorry, the lion will eat straw like the ox. These allusions point to this picture where it's a return to this Edenic paradise that's mentioned in the beginning. So that's the full context of Scripture. Like Michael said earlier, everything else in the middle is the fall of man working out morality and God's will, right? So all of these scriptures about how to kill animals and everything, if we take them at face value, that is at minimum the prophets and the priests channeling morality from God and trying to glean people back, because people were eating each other. People were cannibalistic at that time, and they were doing everything they could to just, hey, let's at least minimize it to this. Let's at least kill them in this way that feels like it's not as harmful to them. That's where kosher laws come from, etc. But then I'd like to take it a step further in that all throughout the Old Testament that we have at the Hebrew Bible, there is a war between the prophets and the priests. Prophets as in orators of God, not monetary prophets. But there's a war between the prophets.
But there's also a war there as well.
There is a war of that also. They go hand in hand. Hey, the cattle, capital, money, capital means of the head of animals. Money and killing animals is tied together, just as it was in the temple that Jesus overturned, which we'll talk about later in this chat. But all of it feeds together. But essentially, these priests were making a lot of monetary profits on the backs of killing animals for sacrifice in exchange for forgiving others' sins.
Right.
But in the same books, all throughout, you have the prophets condemning this practice and calling out the priests. One of the most famous being Jeremiah, the prophet who actually Jesus is confused in the New Testament as being like the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah 7, verse 22 says, God never commanded sacrifices. So he contradicts the priests and what they're saying in the Bible. And people will say, well, wait a minute, but then are you saying part of the Bible is the lie? No, I'm not saying that. That's actually what Jeremiah said, because one chapter later in 8 verse 8, in chapter 8 verse 8, Jeremiah says, the lying pen, what you write with, of the scribes has falsified the Torah. And he's ranting about how animal sacrifice isn't of God, that the priests' skirts are stained with blood, that the temple is going to be destroyed because of their abominations. And he's not the only one. Hosea 6:6 says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, obedience and love for God rather than burnt offerings. And Jesus echoes all of this in his ministry. Right. So what I want to say to everyone who says, well, doesn't it say that literally how to do this? It does say that. But there are prophets who are contradicting it and calling it out all the way up to Jesus, who, like Michael said, flat out ends it. So,
and then most Christians will say, I mean, Charlie used to say this too. They say Christ is King. It's all about Jesus. It's all about following Jesus. All about following Jesus's footsteps, and it's all about worshiping Jesus. And Jesus ended it all. So I mean that like you said, Michael kind of nailed it there in one go. There is a comment, by the way. I'm keeping an eye on the comments, by the way, guys. So keep them coming. If they're relevant, I'll pop them up. And this is relevant. So someone's coming out at you here, Cam. They say, watching this is absolute pain. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. He's a heretic. All of this is going to happen after man disappears from earth, not during the fall of man. So do you want to just give me as concise as you can, because we are here to talk about Charlie and not in gaming PC. But what do you want to say on that, man?
I love being called a heretic. It's always fun. Because Jesus was actually called a heretic by his Orthodox religion of the time. So whatever, I'm in good company. But all that to say, I appreciate this comment. I want to address that what he's referring to is this philosophy of the already not yet, which even in and of itself, that statement is a logical contradiction. And it's that Jesus came to establish the kingdom of heaven, but it's not here yet. It's coming sometime in the future. But the reality is when Jesus reads the Isaiah scroll, in his first time stepping up and stepping into ministry, he reads, it's preserved in the Gospel of Luke, and he says, I am here declaring I am anointed to set the captives free, to declare, righteousness and goodness to the poor, sight to the blind. And he says, this is fulfilled in your hearing on this day. It is fulfilled. And Jesus went on to say, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And like I said, even further, Jesus echoes these sentiments. For instance, in the book of John chapter 10, verse 10 and 11, it's one of my favorite verses of the whole Bible. He says, the enemy or the thief, referring to Satan or the adversary, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come to bring life and life abundantly. The good shepherd looks after or gives his life for the sheep. I am that good shepherd. Now, when you go into the Greek of what's actually being said there, that word, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. That word kill is the Greek thyse or thysia. And that Greek word literally means animal slaughter. It's the process of slaying an animal in ritual sacrifice, which, by the way, is the only way that they ate meat in those days. The large majority of the population of Jerusalem got its meat from the temple, which was a slaughterhouse, through this ritual sacrificial process. The average poor person couldn't afford meat or to have an animal and kill it on the side. So all that to say, to address this person, Jesus came to end the temple sacrificial system, and critical biblical scholars all over the world agree that this is the event that got him crucified. It was the thing that led to his ultimate crucifixion. And when you put two and two together, that he's declaring it's the year of the Lord's favor, he's overturning it, and then you learn what we uncovered in Cowspiracy, which I'm not going to get into it too much here. Everybody should watch it. But Jesus was the Nazarene. Everybody knows, Jesus of Nazareth, right? You've heard that phrase, but that's actually a misnomer for Jesus the Nazarene. It's a sectarian title. Nazareth was probably named after the sect. And these were Jews who followed those prophets that were against the priest. And they're well preserved in the early church fathers like Epiphanius as being just like the other Hebrews, except for one key difference. They rejected animal sacrifice and flesh consumption as not laws of God, because they honored thou shalt not kill as applying to not just humans, but animals as well. Because the Isaiah prophecies that I discussed earlier, the lion laying with the lamb and returning to this Edenic kingdom, was their prerogative. They believed that the way to get there is to start honoring not just the poor and the destitute of humans, but also animals. And Jesus was a part of this sect, Jesus the Nazarene. It's very clearly documented. So to this comment, I would love to hear any other reputations from him. And, I try to study the Bible humbly. And this is a conclusion I've come to. Not, by the way, I am a former fisherman, hunter, church barbecue eater galore. My stepfather owned a barbecue restaurant, and I worked it most of my life. And chewing on these truths that I'm sharing was actually hard for me. It wasn't something I wanted, but once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. You can't unsee it. So I just, ask for you, brother, to keep an open mind and watch our film, by the way.
Nice, man. Nice. I love that. The word concise is not in your vocabulary, I've learned from being friends with you.
I try to cover all the bases.
That's what it is. You know too much, I think. That's what it is. It's it's necessary, I think, at some point. And it depends on obviously the person, but I mean, it's these things are not simple sometimes.
They're not simple, and the problem is if I give a concise answer, I can already know and hear what the person listening is going to say. Yeah, but what about this?
Of course, man. Of course. No, I appreciate it, man. That's why I invited you on. I love the detail you get into, and you don't leave any stone unturned, and it's great, man. That guy did come back, but it's just kind of it seems like he's just bashing his head against the wall. I'll read one more comment and then we'll just move on. But he said,
I can't see the comments, by the way, just what you're putting on screen.
All right, what he says, no, he was crucified because he went against the teachings of the people at that time, and he spoke about forgiveness. He was destined to arrive on the cross read. Actually, let me respond to this one. He was crucified because he went against the teachings of the people at that time. That is literally what Cam just said. Yeah. That is identically, he was against the animal sacrifice, which was one of the teachings of the time. So yes, you are correct. You're both correct. So,
and to add, I 100% agree that he went against the teachings and he promoted forgiveness. Well, what does that mean when you're saying that? Forgiveness was the alternative to the sacrificial system. Jesus is continually saying, we don't need to slaughter some innocent being who did nothing because we did something wrong. No, we need to forgive each other. And he was baptized by John the Baptist to start his ministry, who was, by the way, preaching a baptism for the repentance and forgiveness of sins. So literally, John was preaching, the leader or the forerunner of Jesus, that you could baptize and just wash yourself in water and pray and repent for forgiveness as an alternative to the bloodshed and the gore and the horror that was happening in the temple.
Absolutely. And I think it's great that this is happening on a stream about Charlie Kirk in the wake of what happened to Charlie Kirk, because this is what he wants. This is great that you're having this kind of debate here while we're debating Charlie's comments, and someone in the comments is debating your comments on Charlie's comments. So yeah, I'm glad that we're able to do this in a respectful way. And yeah, thanks everybody so far for being here. Let me just quickly give a couple shouts out before we get back in again. Keiko's been super active. Thanks for being here. Vegan Heretic, that's a good username. You should take that one. Why Vegan, what's up? Caroline's here. How's it going? Thanks for all being here, guys. Knight of Wanganum, that's a pretty cool name. Who else we got? Louis here. What's up, mate? Callum. Is this live or a premiere? It's live. We're live right now. This is straight up happening as you watch it. Boom, we're live. And we're going to kick back in and see what else Charlie Kirk has got to say. In Gaming PC just said, Jesus ate fish. Stick around, buddy, because Charlie Kirk also says that, and we are going to get to that a little later on. What's up, Jason? Jason just said, yo. All right, sweet. Let's go back 5 seconds, just so we're getting into the moment, and we'll see what comes up next.
Of something.
I mean, when Jesus came, he ended the sacrifice, the animal sacrifice. So, again, I think during that time, there was a lot more food shortage.
Well, hold on. Jesus ate fish. He fed the 5,000 with fish.
Yeah, so like I said.
And so, I don't understand. But Jesus didn't say, stop, don't eat the fish. They are sentient beings. He fed fish to people.
Biblical. All right, so Jesus ate fish. He didn't say stop, fish are sentient beings. He fed fish to people. What the hell, Cam?
So this is... Yeah, so this is a point, first of all, that we touch on in our film Cowspiracy. We really skimmed the surface, pun intended, I guess, on it. And then I've gone much deeper on this topic on a follow-up video that we made that's on our channel on Cowspiracy. Maybe you can put it in the notes. That literally is titled, Did Jesus Eat Fish? And this question is one, that could, to your point about being precise or concise, this is a challenging one to be concise on because it goes so deep. There's been such a misunderstanding around these scriptures. But first, let me start with, again, like I said, I was the most avid fisherman that you can imagine. I used to go 40 miles offshore every single summer to catch grouper and snapper and all the like. I talk about this in the video on our channel. And much like Charlie, fish was one of the last things that I actually gave up when I started down this path of wanting to respect animals because of these very misunderstandings that Charlie has. So I totally understand and relate to that thought process. But it was only when I began to search deeper with an open mind, I uncovered how many issues and discrepancies there are. But before even getting to the issues and the discrepancies, I want to lead with saying that even if we take these stories at the face value that they are, let's say it's 100% truth that Jesus fed bread and fish to the multitudes, as the story that Charlie's quoting. There's actually multiple fishing stories that I will cover. But let's stick with that one. Let's say even he did that. The fishing practices that would have been happening in Galilee 2,000 years ago were a few men in a small boat with hand-thrown nets and really small amounts of fish. The kind of fish that we're consuming today and the practices that are happening are dredges and large scale, massive industrial operations that are scooping up the entire ocean in one swoop with these massive nets dragging miles down the ocean floor. I don't think, and maybe you guys in the comments could correct me and have a different opinion on this, prove me wrong, as Charlie says, but I don't think Jesus would have advocated for that, even if he did advocate for fish. I'm not saying he did. I actually hold the opposite position, but I'm saying if he did, that still doesn't justify what we're doing today. I mean, it's horrific. All the bykill, and let's put the fish aside for a second. The number one industry for human slavery, child trafficking, and some of the worst evils is the fishing industry, because these people are operating in international waters and there's no holds barred out there, and they're taking young kids out in Asia and other areas where they literally hold them at gunpoint over sea, and they say, hey, you're going to do this work for us, or we're going to kill you and throw you overboard, and no one will ever know. So it's rampant, this human trafficking and slavery issue. So I don't think that, or the fish farming issue, we won't get into that, but that's detrimental to the environment, all kinds of disease, vaccinating fish. There's so much hard. So none of that applies to the fish stories that Jesus was, involved with. Now that we've got that off the table, did you want to say anything to that, by the way, before I get into the deep stuff?
No, it's good. It's good to steelman the position that, if taking it at literal face value, it's still not working as a good argument for the situation we have today. I think that's important. And it gives a foundation for now what you're about to say, which is actually that you're not fully convinced that they are literal not that they're not literal as written, or that they're potentially. Yeah, go ahead, man. You go ahead with what you're going to say.
There's some fishy stuff going on. Let's say that. So even again, starting with the face value readings of the text, the claim that Jesus ate fish because of these different stories. There's three different genres of fish stories in the scripture. One is Jesus fishing stories, where he is creating this miraculous catch of fish. So that's kind of like the fishing aspect. Then there's the feeding stories, which is what Charlie's referring to here. Jesus multiplies the loaves and the fish and feeds the multitudes and the crowds of people who don't have any food. And then there's two instances in the part of the story where Jesus is resurrected after his death, where he is involved in a fishing narrative, and then there is a eating narrative. But Jesus, in all of those stories I just mentioned, none of them say Jesus ate fish. None of them. They all say that he was involved in what others were doing, but he himself wasn't eating fish. The only one instance where Jesus is recorded as literally eating fish is in Luke 24, the last chapter of Luke, where it says, in his resurrected ghost man, God-like body, he eats this fish. So I do want to clarify that all these other stories don't specify that. That one does. And that's important for what I'm going to say. So starting with the fish stories. And again, I highly encourage, I'm only going to skim the surface of all of these points, and I go much deeper on my video, Did Jesus Eat Fish? So go there for more, and you can catch all my proofs and the sourcing of everything here. So there's a famous story where Jesus helps the apostles catch fish right at the beginning of his ministry. It's known as the miraculous catch. And there's James and John and the others are out fishing, and they haven't caught anything all night, and they're about to hang it up. And then Jesus comes walking along, and he says, hey, cast your net again. Or in another version, he says, cast your net to the right side of the boat. And then they pull up a huge load of fish, right? But then they come to the shore in this story, and Jesus says, hey, drop your nets and become fishers of men instead. So at minimum, again, face value, the moral of the story is Jesus is asking them to leave their profession behind and come follow him in his ministry going to Jerusalem to disrupt the temple. Now, the interesting thing about that story that I think could open people's mind to how these stories are fishy and there can be discrepancies over time in these texts is there are 4 different gospel accounts that all tell the story of Jesus from similar but varying perspectives. They are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's the 4 first books of the New Testament. But what most people don't realize is that critical biblical scholarship in archaeology and manuscript data has shown us that the first gospel ever written was the Gospel of Mark. It was the first one. And then Matthew and Luke built on Mark. They used Mark as a source and added to the story what Mark wrote. In the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus approaches James and John, the fishermen, he doesn't tell them to fish. He doesn't tell them, drop the net, do this, do that, nothing. All he does is he comes up and he finds them fishing and he says, hey, boys, come follow me, drop your nets and become fishers of men. And they immediately drop their nets and leave it behind. That's the oldest version of the story. No miracle, no catch, no Jesus telling them to fish, okay? So critical biblical scholars know that the Gospel of Luke, which builds in the story with the fishing, Matthew doesn't have it either, by the way. Matthew, he walks up and there's no fishing. And in the Gospel of John, that incident isn't even mentioned at all. It's put later in the story after Jesus's resurrection, like I said. So lots of discrepancies here in which Luke adds onto the story. And we know that Luke was the third of these synoptic gospels written, so they're just building on the narrative. So that's that story. There's no legitimate reason to believe that if the earliest account has Jesus with no miracle, if a miracle like that actually happened, or if Jesus actually told them to fish and this happened, wouldn't that be, that's the blockbuster hit of the story. Like, why would he leave that part out? That's how we know that it wasn't the original oldest story that was told. It was embellished, right? And the irony is what I tell in the, just for a little humor to break it up so that we're not so deep in the weeds here. There's a story called, or a movie called Big Fish that Tim Burton made, right? Because this is a famous thing with fishermen, the fisherman's tale. Like, I used to do it when I was a kid, and sailors and old pirate-like, fishermen that I used to run into have this thing or this notion of the fisherman's tale, which is when you're out at sea, you might, you missed a fish or it was about this big, but when you tell the story, it's this big, it's natural embellishment. This is what humans do. We embellish stories over time, and this clearly seems to be the case. So now moving on to what Charlie's addressing here, the miracle of the multitudes or the feeding of the multitudes. We often know it as Jesus feeds the 5,000 or the 4,000 loaves and fish. Well, interestingly, notice what I just said there. There's two different stories, the 5,000 and the 4,000. The 4,000 is only in Mark's gospel, and it only has bread. It says Jesus blesses the bread, breaks the bread, multiplies the bread, and then at the very end, it tacks on to the story, and they had some fish too. Completely different than any of the other stories that the fish and the loaves are all integrated together. So that's interesting. But when you really dig into it, what you come to find out is in Matthew and in Mark, Jesus retells the story later in the gospel when he multiplies in a moment when the disciples are doubting his messiahship or his, him being their leader. He says, well, wait a minute. Don't you remember when I multiplied all the loaves? And he doesn't mention fish at all. This is in Matthew 16:9. Anyone can look it up. Or Mark 9:18 or 18. I forgot the Mark one. Mark 18:9, I think. But regardless, Matthew and Mark record Jesus telling the story in hindsight, and he doesn't mention the fish. Now, what can we draw from that conclusion? One is Jesus, maybe it did happen, but Jesus isn't focused on the fish, and he doesn't believe fish is central to the narrative. It's the bread that's central to the narrative, right? Or maybe that's the original story, and the scribes who wrote the fish in forgot to add it to Jesus's part later because it's later in the story and it's a quick little mention. That's what I tend to believe. That's what most scholars tend to believe. They err on that side of the spectrum. But when you go into the stories themselves, the loaves are constantly mentioned, and it's mentioned that Jesus blesses and breaks the loaves, distributes the loaves. They collect all the loaves in baskets after. And there's just, again, this one little mention of fish where Jesus doesn't bless them. It doesn't mention fish being gathered up afterwards. It's all bread. So how could this happen? How could this discrepancy happen? Well, what we outline, I'm not going to get into all the proofs, but in my video, is the earliest references to the miracle of the loaves is just that. They're all only mentioning the loaves. So the early church fathers, from Irenaeus to Cyril of Alexandria to who else? So many of them. Go watch my video and you'll see I list them all out. When they account and give commentary on this story, they just mention the loaves. And the earliest Christian text that we have is called the Didache. It's a companion. And again, Christians actually use this text. A lot of biblical scholars talk about it. It's the earliest Christian like community text that we have. It mentions the miracle of the loaves and no mention of fish. Now, all that I just mentioned, these church fathers and the Didache, they all predate the earliest known gospel fragment by like over 100 years.
Right.
So it's obvious that the fish is a later development in this story. And then finally, do you want to add to that? And I'm just going to close out with
No, I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, we've had our conversations, and I've interviewed you before, and I've interviewed others, and it's always super interesting to get back into this again. And it really makes you question, who had their fingers in and around this, who was trying to manipulate this because why wouldn't you just, based on what you just said, why wouldn't you just stick to the multiplying bread as the story? Why did fish even come into it at all? And then you got to wonder about the politics around it, and or it could have just been an honest mistake. Even it doesn't necessarily need to be political, but either way, it's a real shame because it really sticks with people, and it's been really nailed into our psyche. That to eat fish because Jesus did or whatever.
Well, absolutely, and I'm glad you framed that actually, because that's a great point. That I definitely have my ideas for the nefarious conclusion. There was a figure named Marcion who was the greatest heretic and earliest heretic. He's the first creator of any biblical canon. He put together an early version of the Gospel of Luke and all of Paul's letters and was preaching around way before our canonical Bible was established. It's, in fact, the reason why they did it is because everybody's like, whoa, this guy's got a Bible and he's passing it off. We got to refute this guy. He was a pretty staunchly against animal sacrifice as well, this guy, but he loved fish. He was a sailor, and he's documented as being a kind of avid pescatarian. And so I think somewhere around the time of this guy Marcion in like 100 AD-ish, this narrative of fish probably started creeping in. Why? Because the Mediterranean is known for being a mostly plant-based diet, with the exception of fish. That was like their primary, animal protein. And so I think they were just like, hey, we can't just tell all these people when we're trying to preach this message to them that they have to give up eating animals. Like, let's at least give them fish. Like, I think that's probably what happened. But to your point about it being an accident, there are good theories behind that. One being that we'll get into the word fish often in the scripture is actually a Greek word that means like a relish or a side kind of dish that is usually made from plants. Actually, like onion relishes are the oldest known variation of this word being used outside of the scripture. Like Homer talks about this word. So there's that theory. But then there's even the theory that, funny enough, in ancient Jewish culture, there were customs where bread molds were made to look like animals, and they would bake bread in the shape of animals. And one of the most common was a fish-shaped loaf of bread. Right. It's an ancient Egyptian tradition from the time of when the Hebrews were enslaved in Egypt before they left. And I actually have a fragment of a Jewish wedding that happened in like 1910. It was like a royal wedding of Judaism. And it was like 20,000 people at this wedding for these two people that were getting married. And the bride on her table had chocolate chariots to represent the Romans who got splashed in the Red Sea when the Red Sea was parted. And the husband of the marriage had fish-shaped loaves. Right. And it was it was known to be it. So who knows? Maybe because the thing is in the gospel narrative, like I said, there's the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. The 5,000, it says there were 5 loaves and 2 fish. And the 4,000 says there were 7 loaves.
Right.
5 and 2 is 7.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So
That's super interesting, man.
yeah.
No, I appreciate you getting into that again, and I implore. Look, if anyone doesn't believe, there's a couple of people who are critical in the comments, and it's like, well, go and verify what he's saying. I mean, there's all the data's here. I mean, later on when this stream goes up, just bookmark this stream, okay, guys, and then later on you can get the transcript. YouTube will do a transcript, and you can literally just copy and paste it, pop it into whatever AI you want to get into, ask it a bunch of questions, and you'll find some stuff out. Like it'll point you to go here, go here, go here. You'll be able to do it.
Really quick, this is going to be super quick. One last thing I want to say to some of these people that are being critical is they're most likely coming from a Christian background like me. And the one thing that's new to me, actually, that I had a realization about that isn't in my fish video that I mentioned on our channel, which is why I'd love to share it here, is Christians love the prophecies of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, that are fulfilled in Jesus. There's so many prophecies in the Old Testament that allude to Jesus, and then he fulfills them by literally acting out the thing. Well, so many miss this, including myself, that Elisha and Elisha are two prophets before Jesus. And in fact, when John the Baptist and Jesus start their ministry, people are going, wait, is that Elisha and Elisha? They refer to them as those prophets. Elisha and Elisha have a multiplication of the loaves story. They literally take 20 loaves and feed thousands of men with these 20 loaves. 0 fish, has nothing to do with fish. So more than likely, this fulfillment of prophecy is a story that's carrying over, and it was the bread originally. And not only that, last thing, this is breaking news. This is breaking news, David.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
I just found 2 days ago the oldest fresco painting of the feeding of the multitudes is in a catacomb in Rome, and it dates to around the beginning of the 2nd century, maybe even into the 1st century, beginning of the 2nd century, most likely. It only has the loaves and grain, and it's got Jesus, and funny enough, he's got a magic wand, and he's like multiplying only bread, no fish.
Right.
So I think it's an earlier tradition. Yeah.
Cool, man. That's super interesting. I'd like to see a picture of that. Have you been to see it, or like have you?
I mean, I can literally share it to you right now if you want to put it up on screen.
Yeah, share it to me while you're going getting that. I'll just quickly respond to a couple comments actually, because we've had some interesting ones. So go on here, and he's still in the chat. A guy called Der Farmer, hopefully actually is telling the truth here. So because I'm going to respond, and I'm going to assume you are. Well, actually, I hope you're not, but whatever. Either way, you get what I mean. As a farmer/rancher, sheep farmer, I feel closest to God when I'm with them. Are you telling me my existence is closeness? My existence with God is all wrong, or something like that. My existence is closeness with God is all wrong. So I'll answer this because I don't think so at all. The thing is, while you're talking about being with the animals, and that brings you closest to God, I think the vast majority of vegans, animal people, animal activists, the vast majority of people in this chat who are vegan 100% agree with you that if they're religious, or even if they're not religious, I mean, the word God has a certain meaning in our lives. Like people talk about feeling close to God or feeling just spiritual, or I don't know, enlightened, godly, when they're experiencing, pure bliss or peace or whatever. And most vegans and most people who care about animals, they feel that when spending time with animals. So no, I'm not saying at all, neither of us are saying that you being close to those animals, feeling close to God is wrong. That's not what's wrong at all. What's wrong is that you or whoever it is you buy them from is breeding animals into existence for profit. You're going to eventually kill them. And if you're not going to kill, if you are not killing them yourself, you're selling them to somebody else who will kill them. And in the meantime, their entire existence only serves to make you money. And you're exploiting them. You're exploiting their skin. You're exploiting them for their milk. You're exploiting them for their flesh. Now the moments where you're spending time with them, of course, I've met farmers. I've known farmers. And they say they feel very, very close to their animals. They feel emotionally connected to their animals. They love spending time with them, and they really do care for them. I mean, look, they're getting up at 5 a.m. to go out and start being with them, and trying to make sure everything's okay and stuff. And so there is a crossover. I don't believe that they're only doing that for money. But if the money wasn't there, you wouldn't do it, would you? You see what I mean? So of course it becomes more than money at some point. A lot of farmers get close to the animals and it becomes more about actually caring about them. And I imagine it's very difficult when you send them off to be killed. But it doesn't change the fact that is what you're doing. That is what farmers are doing. So I guess my conclusion here is that if you want to be close to animals, you want to keep experiencing that, then turn your farm into a sanctuary and find another way to get income. Or you could turn your farm into grow crops, or a lot of farmers are doing mushroom farming at the moment. I think there's actually I think it's quite easy to farm mushrooms. So I think a lot of farmers have got land that's mostly suitable for it because it's indoors and you just need equipment and stuff like that. Look into changing up to mushroom farming. There's a business for it right now. And with the animals you've got, either give them to a sanctuary or turn it into a sanctuary. I mean, I'd bet that 9 out of 10 farmers could easily run an animal sanctuary, because ultimately, if you're not exploiting the animals and you're not killing them and you're not breeding them and you're not selling them, you're running a sanctuary. So, like, you know what I mean? You know how to do it. You know how to keep them well. You know how to, to handle them and clean up the poo and all those different things that need to be done, the health, all these different things. So it wouldn't be too much of a difficult transition. That's how you could stay close to your animals and be close to God and keep experiencing that, but without all the horrors and all of the the exploitation and the killing. And we had another comment from a guy called Jay, who just claims that you were twisting words and quotes. And I just want to quickly just reference that, because as I've said, after this stream, you are more than welcome to go ahead and take the transcript so you can get everything that Cam said in detail. Go and do your research. Go and pop it into, I know these days it's difficult to do research without it because it's so easy to do with it. So use AI, use ChatGPT, use Grok, use all of them and cross-reference them and try and get, and you'll either find that he's telling the truth or you'll find that he's not. But I'm pretty sure by how long Cam has spent on this and what I've looked into, when I've checked what he said and I've double checked and I've done my research, that he's telling the truth. So you'll find the same thing if you go and do that research too. Did you send me that thing?
Yeah, I sent it to you.
Awesome. So let's have a look at this then. We're going to have a look at tell us again, it was the earliest ever.
It's the earliest fresco of the feeding of the multitudes. I mean, it's almost like cave art, but you can see at the bottom, and there are people that have done enhancements to it so you can see more detail. But those 7 baskets down below are grain and loaves, and you can see the name of the fresco. It's the multiplication of the loaves, I believe.
Yeah, I see multiply. Christ multiplies the loaves of bread, anonymous catacomb. Yeah. Right.
So that's cool. The earliest that we have. And that's my whole point, is that we have a tradition now that we're 2,000 some odd plus years late on, right? And the earlier you go into the tradition and the more that you uncover what's been hidden under layers and layers and layers of tradition, you find the evidence like this. And it's nonstop. And like I said, to address that last guy, I understand why you feel that I'm twisting scripture, but I promise you that everything that I've said here, I quote from the Greek text itself, and it's often, in my eyes, the exact opposite, that our English translation of these ancient documents can more often than not twist the meaning of these words, and actually the real twisting is in the other direction. Our film Cowspiracy uncovers one of the biggest ones, which is that when Jesus goes into the temple and flips the tables, what we all learn on Palm Sunday at Easter week, and says, my Father's house is meant to be a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves, right? Well, that word thieves in English is actually a twisting of the scripture, because Jesus quoted Jeremiah, remember who I spoke of earlier, the prophet that he loved to quote. And Jeremiah does not say a Hebrew word that means thieves. And it's a little bit of a spoiler here if anybody wants to skip and watch the film first. But I'll just go ahead and tell it because the truth needs to get out there. Jeremiah said a den of violent ones or murderers. The word is paritz, which is a Hebrew word that literally means to shred apart flesh. And the only other instances that are used in the Bible for that word are one when a lion is shredding the flesh of its prey. And the other use of the word is a prophet warning against having a violent son. And the word is violent paritz, son. And then there's a comma, and it defines what that is. It says a shedder of blood. That's Ezekiel 18:10. So you can go look it up. A paritz is a shedder of blood. So time and time again, these stories in the scripture have been twisted over the last 2,000 years. And one point that I wanted to make, bringing it all back to the Charlie thing.
Yep. Let's do that.
It's with Charlie, it's like, even with this tragedy that we have right now, which I wholeheartedly believe, and we can get into it later on the stream, that violence begets violence. The violence that we inflict on the lowest, if you want to call them that, creatures in terms of intelligence or whatever, the creatures that are the most vulnerable, these farm animals, ultimately translates into violence to one another. And there's tons of psychological data on that. There's tons of historical, anthropological data. So,
dude, we can stay close to what happened. The guy practiced on animals. He was a hunter.
Yeah.
Like, he literally was a seasoned hunter. How do you think he was able to take a shot like that? He wasn't practicing on people, was he? And if you can, if you spend a lot of time practicing pulling the trigger on animals, is it really that big of a surprise that, not everyone, but is it really that big of a surprise that people who do that? I mean, put it this way, right? I'll tell you this. Let's put it this way. Let's just be really logical and reasonable about it, all right? You've got two people. You got a guy who's never shot anyone, human or not, ever in his entire life. Never shot an animal, never shot a person. He's got a high-powered rifle now, okay? You've got a person who has shot a bunch of animals and has, shot to kill or has gone over afterwards and killed them, and he's done it a bunch, right? Out of these two people, which of them is going to find it easier, let's say, or which of them is more likely to be able to pull the trigger on a person? I think we all know logically, if we're looking at this reasonably, and it's going to be more likely that the guy who spent a bunch of time shooting at animals would find it much easier to pull the trigger of a rifle on a person than the person who's never shot anyone ever, right? And so just looking at this, obviously the psychological data backs it up that serial killers tend to start on animals, and this is all there. But even without that, I mean, it's just common sense, isn't it, that someone who's comfortable with shooting animals with a gun is probably going to be, they're not all, I'm not saying everyone who shoots animals could do it, but I'm saying when push comes to shove on a one-on-one, they're the one that's going to be more comfortable doing it than the person who's never pulled the trigger on an animal. Right?
Yeah, and the greatest thinkers, Pythagoras, Leo Tolstoy, Leonardo da Vinci, they all have variations of a quote that's something like, as long as there's slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. The way that we deal with our fellow animals is how we will deal with our likewise humans. And they all echo these ideas that these acts of violence to these vulnerable beings, if we're going to do it to the most vulnerable, defenseless being, of course we're going to be able to do it to our fellow humans. And then you have war and all of these things that are built off the backs of these systems. We go into a lot of this in Cowspiracy, the documentary. But I also want to add too, it's a perfect analogy as well, this Charlie Kirk situation, to this claim that this comment made about twisting scripture, in that we were speaking about this on the phone earlier, David, that right now you have an onslaught of questions, conspiracy theories, what really happened with Charlie Kirk. There's so much of that online. People, there's a question of whether this guy even is the killer, or if he had someone with him, or what's going on. But I use that as an analogy, as if we can have that many questions right now in 2025, where we have cell phones filming everything and we have immediate transfer of data and communication, how are we so quick then? And we still have conspiracy theories and we don't know what's going on. How do we then expect that 2,000 years ago, with zero cell phones, zero immediate communication, but even more so, most people couldn't even write. And we've got these texts that are showing up hundreds of years at times. Some of our earliest fragments of the Gospels are being pushed into the 2nd century, 3rd century. The idea that there hasn't been a misunderstanding, misinterpretation, or even deliberate twisting just doesn't hold water. There's plenty of room for that. Critical scholars agree with it. For everyone who watches scholars like, say, Wesley Huff, who I debated not too long ago, I respect his commitment to his craft, but even he will admit that the Gospel of Mark, again, I said was our first gospel ever written. The last chapters of Mark, after Mark 16, are unanimously known as added to the text. They're later additions. They're not original to the text. And even Wes Huff, this praised Christian biblical scholar, there's a video, you can look it up right now, about the long ending of Mark from Wes Huff. He straight up says, yeah, it's not original. It's not inspired. It's not a part of the original text. So all that to segue to my last point, which is, and I'll sum it up because I'm not going to go deep on it. John 21 and Luke 24, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this whole fish rant, are the two instances where Jesus is in his resurrected body, and he's in John 21 with Peter fishing, and then they come to the shore and there's some opsarion cooking, which again is the word that actually means relish, not fish. So he already had whatever he was eating before they brought any of the ichthus, the actual Greek word for fish, to the shore. But in Luke, it does say that he ate fish, ichthus. The word is ichthus. However, there's discrepancies. Some versions of ancient Luke say fish. Some versions say fish and honeycomb. And then Tertullian, one of the earliest church fathers, says Jesus ate honeycomb. He doesn't mention the fish. Right. So there's all of these discrepancies, right? So my point is, like the long ending of Mark, and I go in detail on this in my video, so I highly recommend everyone who's skeptical, go watch it. Luke 24 is the last chapter of the text of Luke. And in the very ending of that last chapter is the story where Jesus eats fish. And it's after a whole other resurrection story where he breaks bread with the disciples. It's tacked on after. Stylometric analysis has proven by word use and vocabulary that this is a later addition. I show all the data in the video that I made. And it's the same thing with John 21. John 20, chapter 20 ends the book. It says, this is the book where all of these things were recorded. It's the last chapter of the book. And then all of a sudden, a new chapter. Historians, biblical scholars, critical scholars, and even a lot of theologians agree that John 21 is a later epilogue added on. So these books and these stories are obfuscations of the truth. And what I want to say lastly on that note is, if anyone really wants to go to the truth, research the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. And don't even take my word for it. Just go down the rabbit hole. All of the church fathers, from as early as Papias to Jerome to Epiphanius, they all mention this Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, which predates all the Greek Gospels, but we don't have it anymore. I wonder why. But they all quote it as the original authentic Gospel of Matthew. That's what Jerome says. And he says that the Nazarenes were the ones who used it. The Nazarenes, right? Well, in this earlier Hebrew Gospel, it's attested by the church fathers because they're reading it. We don't have the text anymore, but they're reading back what it says. And it's preserved that Jesus, after surviving his crucifixion, meets with his brother James the Just and breaks bread with him. That's the story. It has nothing to do with fish. It's the earliest account. And not only that, it's to his brother James the Just, which was the actual successor to Jesus, not Paul, not Peter, etc. It's James the Just. And James the Just is heavily documented by the church fathers as rejecting flesh consumption, full stop, from his mother's womb, it says. So Mary, the mother of Jesus, taught and raised James to not eat animal flesh. So if we know that, that's an indisputable historical fact by unanimously accepted by scholars. So if that's Jesus' brother, why would Mary not raise Jesus to be the same, right? So these are the questions that we ask in our film.
Awesome, man. I mean, there's so much that you said there. I wouldn't even know where to begin. And I think there's no questions because you literally covered every single thing. I think we just move. But there are two things that I want to say before we get back into this video, because one of them is not important. One of them is. The thing that's not important is earlier on you mentioned Homer, and just for a little bit of comic relief, I saw someone on a game show the other day, and they were asked, what does Homer talk about being his favorite food? And they said donuts, because they thought the question was about The Simpsons and not about the. So that was quite funny. Anyway,
what does he say? Don't, right? Yeah. Didn't he do that noise or something? Homer.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing was that I just want to get this because I feel like somebody watching might say this, and they would be right to say this at this point if they did, because I need to clarify this. Earlier on, we were talking about how killers start with animals, and then you moved on to talk about how conspiracy theories, misinformation about Charlie, and how that links with the misinformation even in the scriptures and the Bible. But I do want to say one thing in that I don't want anyone to watch this, because at the end of the day, look, we're talking about Charlie here, and we have already acknowledged that a man was murdered in cold blood in public in front of his children. I don't know if we've acknowledged that quite as frankly as that, but that is frankly what happened, and it's absolutely disgusting. It's one of the worst things I've ever witnessed, and I've witnessed a lot of horrible things, as in like online anyway, and so I don't want it to appear that we're kind of using that to work back and be like, oh, here's why we shouldn't kill animals, or like, oh, and here's why we shouldn't trust the Bible or whatever, or here's why we should criticize. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're 100%. We are deeply affected by what happened, both of us. It's absolutely horrific. But what it has done is opened up a conversation that allows us to explore these things. I don't want anyone to watch this and come away thinking that I'm using what happened to Charlie Kirk as an excuse to talk about animals or an excuse to talk about the Bible. That's not what's happening here. What we are doing is, we're both creators that work in this space. So we work in the animals. I work in the animal space. Cam works in the animal and the Christian space. We're doing what we do best. We're talking about the things that we specialize in light of what happened, and we happen to have this video that went super viral. That's what we're doing here. If we were in the space of political commentary or social commentary or whatever, then we'd just be straight up talking about what happened, and that would be our main focus. The only reason we're not is because that's not our space. So I just want to make that super clear, because I would hate for anyone to think that we're just trying to use this tragedy as some sort of goal just to get our own goals met. And it's like, no, absolutely not. Like last week was horrific. And if absolutely horrific couple of days over
absolutely, and if I could clarify on that too, that like when I found out the news, I was so utterly shocked and numb, and I was actually at the beach. It was just after my birthday, and I was at the beach for my birthday, and it absolutely ruined the rest of my day, and multiple days after that, because like I said, my little brother was killed, murdered at gunpoint, and it just brought up so much feelings around that, and knowing what his family and what the world's going through by realizing that, because I remember the day that I found out the news from my brother. And since this moment with Charlie, my family, especially my mom, has been wrecked. But before this stream, I would literally 20, 30 minutes before the stream, I was holding my mom crying about this issue, because she knew I was doing this. She knew what I was going to talk about. And the point isn't to use, again, like you said, to use this tragedy to make some other point. The point is that and just like my mother, who experienced the loss of her child by the same means that Charlie was lost, she will tell you now that she's done the same research I've done, coming from a Christian background, being conservative in her value set, and all of these things, same as me. Most of my values, I would say, lean on the conservative side. We're so distraught by how blinded that spectrum of our world is to how the violence towards animals is connected to this violence, so much and so that as people who literally dealt with this violence, who literally had a close family member murdered in the same way, our almost immediate thought in all the trauma and being jarred, I thought, this has to stop. People don't understand that we're missing like this root cause issue. The violence begets violence, begets violence, begets violence, begets violence. And I really mean that from the deepest heart of my hearts. I hope everyone can feel it with me saying it, that I'm not trying to ride and put some agenda on top of another agenda. I'm trying to get to the core of this. So
I respect you for coming on and doing this, with it being such a personal thing for you. And I hope your mum is all right with what we've done so far. I feel like we've been very respectful. I feel like we're doing this where we're really talking about the ideas, and of course it's sort of like from what we know, neither of us knew this guy personally, and neither of us completely agreed with him on everything. But I think there's one thing we all agreed on, is that if you've got something you want to say and you believe something, it's wise to invite people to come and prove you wrong, right? That is how you strengthen. That's how you find truth. And I think that's one of the best things that he did say, regardless of whether you believe he actually went and did that or not. A lot of people don't believe that he actually practiced what he preached, and that's fine. You can believe that, but he did preach it. And it is a good message to say that, you know, you find truth through testing your ideas. And as vegans, especially, that's, you know, well, as vegan creators, as activists, that is something we do every single day. And it's important that we do it because that's how we strengthen, you know, our fight for animals. We have to be saying things that are correct. We have to be saying things that make sense. We have to be showing people the truth about what happens to animals, the truth about where your basis of your morals come from, right? Why do you believe what you believe about animals, which is what we're doing today. Other great creators like Dr. Matthew Nagra, who talks about the truth of the health side of things, that we don't need to eat animals or animal products. He does a great job of exposing the misinformation from the meat industry, from the dairy industry, and teaching people about nutrition. You know, you've got multiple angles here, but it's all about we have to test our ideas, we have to strengthen, we have to keep moving forward. And so that's what we're doing today. And I truly believe that if there is an afterlife, if there is something, you know, after this, and if Charlie were able to see this, I'm sure he'd be sitting there being like, good, I'm glad people are still doing this. I'm glad people are still questioning me and questioning what I said and challenging me, even though I'm not there anymore. Because that's what he preached. That's what he stood for. So I hope your mum and anyone else who is, you know, feeling this and feeling the emotions of this, I hope you realize that that's you know, it is what he stood for. So
the spirit of debate is so important. And like you said, I feel it really is a part. I mean, many people have said it's a part of his legacy. And so if anything, to give him those flowers, like one of my favorite comments I saw in the slur of commentary around this whole event was someone just said in a comment section I saw, they said, you know, my favorite thing about Charlie is that right now we're witnessing young people everywhere around the world on universities and in public just thrashing each other's ideas. And that's what the Greeks did. Right. That's what the Greeks did back in that culture in a civic way, you know, not with violence, which is how this is such a tragic thing. But I want to carry on the spirit. And I think that's what we all need, is we need to be able to express our ideas and scrutinize them. Definitely.
And let's continue doing it then. Let's finally find our way back to the video. But it's good. We've got a couple more points that he makes in the religious side of things. So let's I think he's going to talk about the multiplication, but we already did that. And then I think there's a little bit more.
Just didn't say, stop, don't eat the fish. They are sentient beings. He fed fish to people.
Okay, let's just jump forward then and get to the... And for those just joining the video here, is Charlie Kirk deleted this debate with a vegan. It's my video. Charlie Kirk did delete this debate. He took it offline. My video went super viral, got 718,000 views, with half of those views roughly coming over the last week since Charlie was murdered. And so that's a reason that we're taking another look at this. A lot of people asked a lot of questions, and that I wasn't able to answer religious questions, and that's why Cam's here. For anyone just popping in, Cam is the director of Cowspiracy, an incredible film about Jesus. So he's well versed to answer these questions. Okay, let's have a look. Still worth correcting. Cool.
So in a survival...
But hold on, Jesus is God. He could have been, here's a legume. Jesus is God. He could have said, here's an almond. He said, Jesus is God. He could have, here's a lentil. Yet Jesus said, here's fish. So who are you to question Jesus, who he fed the 5,000 with? He could have said, here's tofu.
Again, the
question is, so, okay, we already dealt with that, and he could have, I mean, instead of bread, he could have done tofu or lentils, but I assume Jesus had his reasons for choosing bread. And,
well, for practical purpose, I don't know that tofu was invented yet. Maybe it was. I can't remember. It was in Asia really, really early, but I don't think it was that early.
Right.
But regardless, Jesus talked about plant foods. I mean, he used parables and analogies and talked all about sowing and reaping and seed. The mustard seed is the kingdom of heaven, all these things. So he talked about plant foods a lot. And like I said, the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew has very explicit condemnations of flesh eating. All of that's covered in our film Cowspiracy.
Amazing. Yeah, tofu probably wasn't invented yet. But Jesus is God though, Cam. Could he not have just
whipped it up? Well, that was my point. Regardless, with the face value of the fish stories, where he miraculously multiplies them or catches them, it's like I said that to Wes in my debate, like, yeah, they're miracle fish. And then he was like, oh, you're saying they're like magical? And I was like, no, I'm not saying they're magical. I'm just saying if he's God and he can do this per your, framework of this story, he could have just created lifeless, non-sentient, dead fish without any suffering. So, that's a whole other point, but
Right.
I digress.
All right, man. We'll go back, and I can't actually remember if he has. Oh, he does. There's another good one coming up. Actually, I remember an interesting argument.
So the disciples brought him fish and bread. That was what he multiplied.
Yeah, the feeding of the 5,000, right?
But I think in this modern day, we do not need to eat meat to be healthy, have good performance, and survive, and therefore causing immense suffering to these beings that do feel pain and suffering is wrong.
So I know this might seem unrelated, but I would hope to say you're also pro-life, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you are consistent. When vegans are not pro-life, that is a...
Yeah, I'm overall conservative. I agree with you on pretty much everything besides this one issue.
But you would agree, though, animals are not humans.
Yes.
Okay, but you would say if I eat a steak, am I doing something immoral?
I would say that if you eat a steak knowing that, and you didn't have to, and you chose to pay for an animal.
Yes, I plan to do this tonight, so tell me what.
Michael. So yeah, I'll pause there. I made a comment here that I found him to be a little bit, considering the beginning of this video, Michael had said, I appreciate it if everyone would take me seriously. I'm being serious. Please don't mock me. Don't laugh at me. I'm not here to make jokes. I'm here to be serious. And Charlie says, okay. And then he cracks a joke. And it's, it is what it is. In hindsight, I mean, I think I said in my video when I reacted to it, it's like, look, it's not the end of the world. I'm sure Michael can take a joke. But it's just, it was just a little bit rude, a little bit unnecessary for someone who's trying to make a point. And what he says there about how, if you don't need to do that to an animal, and better, as in a lot of people are ignorant to what happens to animals, or they think animals are like vegetables. They don't think that they feel and things like that. It's like, yeah, sure. If you don't know, you don't know. You can't be blamed necessarily. But when you do know, and when you've made this, realization about animals that cows and pigs and sheep and chickens are not different in the ways that matter to your dog at home or your cat at home, and they have a personality the same, and they feel pain and they feel joy. They can also feel sadness, and they can suffer psychologically and physically just like you. When you realize all of this, if you then keep on killing them and eating them and using them and all these things just because you like it, is that immoral? Well, that's what Michael's saying here, that yes, well then that would be immoral, wouldn't it? In the same way that it's immoral to go out and murder somebody, but if they were attacking you, then that morality changes, right? If your only choice is to murder somebody to whatever, they're attacking you or they're attacking someone or whatever, then the morals start to get a little bit muddy and gray, and actually murder can be justified. The same way that, a lot of people would say if you're out, in somewhere where you literally have to kill an animal for some reason, whether it be to survive or whether it be they're attacking you, then of course we can justify it. But if it's just for your own pleasure, for your own convenience, for your own taste, or for sport, or for, for spectacle like a bullfight, or, well, then Michael's saying, well, that's immoral. And I agree with him. I think that it is immoral. And I know you do too, right, Cam?
Yeah. I mean, he said a lot there that I think is worth touching on. He's coming off the back of the fish story and saying like, hey, Michael's saying maybe that happened. But if it did, it happened at that time where maybe that was the only thing available to them, which is a great point. But now we have so much more available to us. And we see the evidence of this in the ministry of Jesus, of always pushing towards the ideal, maybe honoring or respecting that there are times, just as we often say, like, hey, if you're truly in a survival situation, like if I'm like on a desert island and I'm on my last breath and I'm about to die and there's literally no coconuts or whatever, and I have to start eating a bug or this, that, we're all probably going to do what we have to do. But right. Jesus, in a similar way, he says when he's challenged by the Pharisees about the topic of divorce, which was very hot topic at that time. Like they really didn't believe that divorce was okay. You're meant to really stay with your partner for your life. And they saw that as a really good moral thing to do. And they asked Jesus about that. And they say, well, what do you have to say about this? Because they're trying to trip him up on what he's going to say, how he's going to handle it. And he says in the Gospels that we have in our Bible, he says, from the beginning, it was not so, meaning divorce wasn't a thing in the beginning in this perfected world where there's no violence, where there's just the same kind of veganic paradise. He says, but because of your hardness of heart, now we engage in divorce. This is what's happening. So he's saying that this thing considered to be immoral at the time was due to a hardness of the heart, and it was not so from the beginning. Well, why is that interesting in this conversation? Because in the Syriac version of the Gospel of Luke, called the Evangelion de Mafarish, I think is how you pronounce it, Syriac is basically a sister language to Aramaic. It's a development of the Aramaic language, which is what Jesus actually spoke and his followers actually spoke. It's an ancient Semitic language. So the version of Luke that we have in the Syriac has aspects that are just slightly different and closer to, again, the original Aramaic dialect. And in that Gospel Luke, in Luke 21:34, he says, be wary to not let your heart become hardened by the consumption of flesh and the drinking of, or being intoxicated, getting drunk, and what's the third? Oh, and the anxieties of the world. Now we have a similar verse in our canonical Gospels, but they've changed the eating of flesh part into dissipation. Which, do you even know what that word means? Have you ever heard the word dissipation? Yeah, no one even knows what that. It's like this random word, but this scholars know that this. There's multiple scholars who have done deep dive research in critical scholarship on this Evangelion from the Syriac, and it's proven to be copied from a text that had to have been like turn of the 1st century into the 2nd century. So again, quite significant time before our oldest known fragment of our Greek Gospel of Luke that we have today. So more than likely Jesus said something like this, and it matches, again, like I said, that he's kind of saying from the beginning, you now have this hardness of heart and you're eating this flesh, but it's going to keep disconnecting you from the other. Because what is Jesus's ultimate message? And this is something I really want to hit with everyone who is a Christ follower. What is Jesus's ultimate moral axiom? What is his epistemic standard, his truth claim? When he's challenged by the Pharisees, what is the greatest commandment? What is the ultimate thing? He says, it is to love God and to love others as yourself. And this sums up all the laws and the prophets. And so when you apply that golden rule, moral axiom, do unto others that which you want done to yourself, and do not do, which is the way Matthew words it, do not do unto others that which you do not want done to yourself. What are others? That word for others in the gospel covers the basis of animals as well. And I truly believe that these ancient Nazarenes, when you dig into their text and understand what they were writing about, they saw others as everything that has that breath of life, which in scientific terms is sentience. It's the ability and the capacity to have conscious awareness and suffer. And so he was preaching. And so as we're developing as people who follow this moral framework of Christianity, if you're out there and you're listening to this, really dive into that. If you dive into anything, dive into the golden rule, that ultimate moral epistemic standard and axiom of Christ, and decide and really contemplate, does that apply to animals as well, especially in 2025 when we have other options? Absolutely.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing a biblical element to that. It's great to have that. You can look at it just looking at it with a rational lens, like a kind of just a logical lens without bringing biblical elements to it. But then you can also apply that to it as well. And it just, it's great because a lot of people might come across this and say, oh, well, it doesn't really convince me, from a Christian perspective, I'm not a Christian, or I'm not that into the Bible, I'm not that into Christianity. And that's where Michael's point here works really well. And then if they are, they can appreciate both points. So I think that's really good.
Totally. And then I was going to say, with that, it's like even Jesus is known for people like John Dominic Crossan is a biblical scholar who talks about this. There are many scholars who talk about the Socratic philosophical, logical nature of Jesus and his teachings. Like, he definitely was taking the culture of the time and extending logic. For example, the golden rule I just said, do unto others that which you want to do. So this is a logical kind of truth claim. This is a kind of an epistemic standard that he's laying out. And so there is a lot of crossover there. And I feel ultimately too, Charlie's trying to apply this later in what he said, he challenged the moral standard of Michael by saying, well, where do you stand on abortion? And, Michael answered, I think back that he's pro-life, I guess, or some form of it. I don't know exactly where he stands on that. But for me, myself, again, like, I have personal experiences with these things. Myself, my mom, who I was talking about, she had me when she was 16 and I was this close to being aborted. So I have my own moral epistemic standard for that as well. And I just want to any of the Christians that are out there listening, I've seen that rebuttal cast a lot towards vegans of like, hey, if you're not pro-life, then you're inconsistent. But everyone needs to know that there are plenty of pro-life vegans in the world. So because someone doesn't hold that standard doesn't mean that that's everyone. And in fact, you can then remove veganism from that association, because I can flip that same thing back on anyone who's pro-life and say, well, hey, you're inconsistent if you're killing animals, because animals have lives.
Right.
So,
well, it's if they levy that at vegans and say, like, you're a hypocrite if you're a vegan, but you're not pro-life, then it means if you're pro-life and not a vegan, then you're also a hypocrite. So it kind of is a double-edged sword. You know what I mean?
Right.
But anyway, what I tend to say is, along those lines is, if someone asks, oh, well, they say, I don't really appreciate these categories. I don't think it really helps to be called pro-life or pro-choice. They're kind of just they're sort of branding and marketing. I think it's quite simple, and I think most people would agree with this. It's just how I live, and my take on it is, I personally live in a way that avoids ever having to be in the situation where that would need to be a consideration. That's how I want to live my life. If we all agree to live that way, then this conversation would largely it would be a very small minority conversation, but unfortunately, a lot of people choose not to live that way, and then it leads to, this becoming like a massive, in America, national issue, but across the world, an international issue, because, there's a hell of a lot of people that are in situations where they're considering it, when it could easily be fixed if people just made a lot of effort to not put themselves in those situations. I mean, it's not even a lot of effort, it's basic effort. If people are more responsible, there wouldn't be as much of a debate around this, because it wouldn't be a massive issue. Do you see what I'm getting at? And I think
totally.
that's kind of my response when someone asks me, oh, but are you pro-lifer? No, I just do everything I can to avoid ever needing to be in that situation where I'd even think about it. That's what I do. What do you think?
Yeah.
And they're usually like, oh, that's pretty reasonable. Okay, cool. And I think most vegans, I think that's a good response, because I would bet that 9 out of 10 people also do that. You know what I mean? Or at least say they do, right? I think at least would say that that's a reasonable take, right? So I think that's how I deal with it, because otherwise you get into a whole bloody thing with them, or you put yourself in you give yourself this marketing branded, like, oh, you are in that bucket now, and then you piss off a bunch of people in the other bucket, and it's just not worth it. Just straight up say it, like, just say, oh no, I try to avoid, I'm going to do whatever I can to avoid ever needing to do that, because it's not a pleasant, even if you're pro the right to have it, it's not exactly a pleasant experience. It's not something you're hoping to do one day, is it? You know what I mean? I don't think anyone is excited for that. So, I mean, saying that you do everything you can to avoid it because you never want to be in that situation is a pretty good take, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great take. I've never heard it put that way. That's a good way to word it. I have the unique, I guess, position in that I literally, like I said, I have when I was about to be born, I was literally this close to not being here because of abortion. And so when I do advocate ever, and it's not much because I'm, spending my time in other places, but I've been a part of that before. I'm always just advocating for myself. I'm like, I'm stoked that I'm here, and I hope that more people choose that. And like you said, choose preventative measures. But then on the same token, like the pro-choice people, they don't that are labeling themselves on that position. they don't have it easy either, because it's all the whole my body, my choice thing. But then that ends with like animal bodies, because most pro-choice people are eating animals as well. And they're inflicting all of this bodily.
Oh, there's inconsistencies across the board. Yeah, there's inconsistencies. This is the thing. What you just said is also, it's nuanced. You know, like this is the thing. There's a lot of nuance that's lost in this discussion. Like you're saying, well, I would hope to convince somebody to not do this because you know that could be another me, and that's what you said. That could be another me, and I would hope that people wouldn't do this because of the extreme negative impacts that it has. Even if we're not even going to get into the debate that most people want to talk about, like the you know, whatever it is, I'm not even going to go into it. But usually people talk about the, you know, all the stuff people normally talk about. Nobody's actually going to this level where they're just like, well, why don't you just, you know, encourage people to be more responsible? And then in your case, I'd like to encourage people to, you know, not do it for various reasons. But it's not like you need to get into a whole political debate on it and get into all sorts of, I don't know, philosophy on it. It's just like, well, I mean, it's pretty standard stuff, really. Like just be responsible with your life and try to avoid ever being in that situation and make big efforts to do it. It's quite, I don't know. Anyway, but in this case, that's what I would have said if I was in Michael's position. Michael just went straight up and just said, "Oh no, yeah, I'm with you on that," which was, I think, a way to progress the conversation forward. His position is a little more nuanced, but I don't think he didn't want to derail things actually. And I know Charlie wouldn't have agreed with his nuanced position, and so it's a good job that he didn't do that, because it would have just gone into a whole other thing. But anyway, we'll jump back in. Where are we up to? So we just talked about that, didn't he? Just
if you eat a steak.
Okay, now he's talking about it being immoral. That was it.
Knowing that, and you didn't have to, and you chose to pay for an animal.
Yes, I plan to do this tonight. So tell me what.
The joke. Okay, so we'll jump forward to the next bit then, because
I'll just say too, really, while you're doing that, the joke thing, honestly, like, I mean, I'm guilty of this. I think everybody, when they're uncomfortable and they realize that they're like, they're
losing
bad
debate, on the back foot. Yeah.
Resulting to a joke kind of eases the tension and everything. So that's actually, I think, a key indicator that maybe there's some cognitive dissonance unraveling in the mind, you know?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, no. Like I said, it was a very, very common denominator joke. I don't think it was particularly funny. It was more of it was more mean than a joke. It was kind of like a dig on Michael. But like you said, it could well just be okay, I'm kind of losing ground here. How can I get people to like click back in again? Well, I'll just say something funny that kind of mocks him, and everyone will, you know, whatever. It's not the end of the world. It's not. I even said I think I said in my response, it's like, it's not a big deal, but it's just a little bit of a, you know, it's a bit of a shitty thing.
The breeding, exploitation, and killing of animals for food is immoral. Yes.
Immoral.
Yes.
But by what moral standard do you derive that from?
Well, are you against animal cruelty?
Of course I am. No one wants cruelty. In fact, the Bible's explicitly against animal cruelty. And so all of us should be. The animals actually made an appearance in the 10 Commandments. Animals got a Sabbath. They got a day off. It says, for 6 days you shall work and 1 day you shall rest, including your ox and your animal. So the Bible actually has done more for animal rights than any other ancient scripture that we can ever find. So I'm all there. No one wants animal cruelty. However, I just...
So we'll pause there, because I think earlier on, I think both you and Danny had said that this is a contradiction, because earlier on he said it's the Bible's the most pro-meat book. But actually, I got to say, I actually don't agree with you that it's a contradiction, because a book can be simultaneously super pro-meat. It could also, if it's rectifying some of the horrific ways people kill animals, that it can also be extremely pro-animal. Like, as in, if the whole world is just chopping animals to pieces, completely alive, and just whatever, killing them by letting them bleed, by like cutting one leg off and just letting them over a week period die, and then a book comes along and says, hey, look, listen, meat is awesome, all good, but you got to do it like fast and don't do it in front of each other and all this sort of stuff, then you could say that book is very pro-meat, but also is very pro-animal for the time, right? Today, we wouldn't say that, because today we know, like, for our time, 2025, we now are fully aware that, well, actually, no, we don't need to do any of that to animals. So a book that would say that today, in 2025 context, that wouldn't be a pro-animal book necessarily. It would be they would be more leaning towards the the pro-meat, anti-animal book. But for the time it was written, it was both pro-meat and pro-animal, right? Would you not agree?
What I mean by contradiction is he's so adamantly stating it to support his justification for meat consumption on one side,
right?
But then here he's pushing back against animal cruelty and using the scripture to push back, and it has a contradiction so far as that he's using it in two different purposes. But I hear what you're saying, in that you could, maybe it's like he's taking it like a welfareism almost kind of thing, where it's like, it supports meat, but we need to do it right. And even if
in a time where people thought they had to, it's in a time where people were being told that, the consumption of meat was, I don't know if they were being told it was necessary, or if around that time it was kind of it was happening anyway, and nobody was saying it's wrong or don't do it. So if it's going to be done, then a book that's saying, hey, look, there are, give the animals a day off on a Sunday and do it in these specific ways or whatever it is that cause that don't cause as much distress, then Charlie would be right in saying, well, it's a pretty pro-animal book, but it would be pro-animal for the time, because it's not with today's context.
It's similar to like halal with Islam, right? That
exactly.
These are things that are definitely pushing forward towards some type of humane treatment, these kind of buzzwords, etc. Yeah. However, the interesting thing that I want to point out, and why it feels maybe not a contradiction in Charlie's mind to what he was saying, but in my mind, this is the mentality, and this is the thought path that led me to where I am, is that I started to see, wow, there's two things in the scripture being said here. One is this violent perspective towards animals, but then there's also this extremely blatant nonviolent perspective and really pro eating plants in the beginning and in the end ideal state, the ultimate ideal state. And all of this stuff is when man is supposedly sinning and all of this horror, and that's the time that it's associated with the animal violence. And then threaded throughout, Professor James Tabor, who's in our film Cowspiracy, he's one of the foremost critical biblical scholars of early Christianity in the world. He's actually part of the team that helped get the Dead Sea Scroll material out to the public. He's detrimentally important to everything that has to do with the Bible. He says that there are two threads running through the Bible. There's the scarlet thread, which a lot of people have referred to as this kind of blood ritual, death, violent aspect of the scripture. But there's equally what he calls the blue thread, which is the compassionate, the nonviolent, the seeking to do justice and righteousness and peace. And it extends from humans down to animals all throughout the scripture. And my argument and his argument would be that is the stronger voice. It's almost like, the positive and negative polarity, and you need the negative. It's like when you watch a movie, there's got to be a villain in the movie, or what's the movie even about? Like when there's a hero, there's got to be a villain, or what's he the hero of, right? So it's almost like these texts are showing you the diametrically opposed position throughout it, but it's always the positive position that's seeking to gain ground, right?
Yeah, so I understand what you said about it does feel like a contradiction in that way, because then, because Michael was arguing in favor of not killing animals, and Charlie used the Bible to say it's okay to kill animals. And then Michael put forward that, animal abuse, you agree animal abuse is wrong. And Charlie uses the Bible to then, basically he's using the Bible to take the popular positions. That's the contradiction. When it suits the popular position, like, everybody in the audience wants to eat meat. Hey, guess what? The Bible says it. Everyone in the audience is against animal cruelty. Hey, guess what? The Bible says it. It's sort of like, it feels like a contradiction there. But in reality, he's I don't know if it is a contradiction, like I said, for the reasons I said, because like you said, the thing is what he's not done though, he's not tracked the conversation. That's what we can definitely pull him up on there. And that earlier on he said, but the Bible teaches you, it's explicitly pro-meat and it teaches you how to kill animals. And Michael already said, but then Jesus came back and stopped all of that. So the conversation shouldn't be going back. That should have been dealt with. And then basically, if we're going to move on from that, then actually, so there's no contradiction if Charlie would have conceded that. If he'd have just said, okay, fine, move forward, then him saying this now wouldn't be a contradiction. Actually, it would be like, oh, he's seen the light, actually, that the Bible is actually very pro animal. That then there wouldn't be a contradiction. But I guess it feels like one if he actually did. He never acknowledged Michael's earlier point when he said that Jesus came back and stopped that, though, stopped the animal sacrifices, stopped the killing, right?
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah, and I totally follow you. And then I think the last little missing piece in the cognitive dissonance that's happening from Charlie's side, which is even able to present this as somewhat of a contradiction or a full contradiction, is the missing piece is, what is animal abuse? Like, is it...
Of course, yeah.
Is killing animals for food in any capacity, because there is inherent suffering, death, forcibly taking the life against another being's will, impregnation, all the things that come along with it, is that abuse? Does that constitute for abuse? Or does somehow the perception of necessity from the consumer, does that somehow offset it? And then that gets into a whole grading of like, where's the grading of what's abuse and what's not abuse? And so I'm a big fan of the philosophical position of the law of non-contradiction, which is ironic because we're talking about a contradiction here, that a truth can't be two things at once. It's impossible. It's the law of non-contradiction. So it's either like killing an animal is either abuse or it's not. It can't actually be both. Like it can't. There's not a real way for that gradient to fall, in my personal opinion, and from a philosophical perspective. So
yeah,
I think that's
you're right. I mean, it's a complicated. I know we're kind of getting into semantics, but I think the way I would put it is like, from the animal's perspective, they're being abused when they go to the vet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? From their perspective, when the vet starts poking and prodding and injects them with some medicine and it hurts them, to them, that's abuse. That's no different than someone doing that because they like it. So if we're looking at it from their perspective, especially, and yes, of course it's abuse. Regardless of whether you need to do it, it's abuse. Now, I think the next question would be, well, okay, if it's abuse, is it justified? And this is then where we start to say, no, it isn't. When it comes to what we do to animals today, for hundreds of millions of people all around the world, including everybody watching this, because if you've got the internet and you've got time to sit down and watch a stream, guaranteed 100% certainty you do not need to consume animals or animal products. And so then when you are doing that, you are abusing animals, and it is not justified. It is not, you are not doing it, but you are supportive of it, you're funding it, you're paying for it, as we all used to, by the way. I'm not judging you, I'm just putting it out there in the hopes that you'll listen and make some changes, all right? Because they really need us to. And so, it's not justified. Now, obviously, if there's a nuclear fallout and we end up having to do this to survive, it would probably still be, well, from the animal's perspective, farming them, exploiting them, breeding them, mutilating them, killing them. From their perspective, that's still abuse, regardless of us needing to do it. And it would become a necessary evil. There are lots of things that are necessary evils in our days that we've just got to suck up. And that would, farming and eating animals was at one point a necessary evil. For some people today, it still is a necessary evil. And at some point in the future, I hope not, but there might be some massive, horrible global event that makes it a necessary evil for the majority of people again. But the fact of the matter is that right now, it is not a necessary evil. It is not necessary at all. It is completely done for millions of people, hundreds of millions of people. It's done for taste. It is done for convenience. It is done out of ignorance. And that's what we're trying to change. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I even brought you on here to have a stream. That's why I even make videos. That's why I'm doing all my projects, is because I want to leave this world a better place for animals than I found it. And I want people to start to see this, to see these facts, to see the reality, and have these discussions and start making changes, right? Because everyone can make a change today. Everyone watching this today, no matter who you are or where you're at, you could do something today. You could make a change today that would make the world a better place for animals. And it literally all starts the easiest things, just literally going from one aisle to another at the supermarket and choosing something different. There's nothing else you could do in your entire life that would make such a difference in something so simple, right? What else could you do on a daily basis that could have like such a monumental impact for such a massive moral issue that, the big philosophers out there say that what we do to animals is the biggest moral emergency of our time. There is nothing that comes close in scale and suffering. No human issue comes anywhere near the scale and suffering that animals go through. In our food system specifically, but also outside of it, but in our food system specifically, it's absolutely insane. And all the consumer has to do to help with that is just just go a little bit further down the aisle and choose something else and spend the money on something else. God, name one other issue that you could do that with. Like what any other issue, wild,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, that's the thing, is there isn't. And not only that, but I spent so much of my life as a young Christian before I really got down this path, trying to exercise the compassion that I saw in Jesus, and in that missionary-esque sense of wanting to help the world and serve the poor and take on the challenges of the world. I was involved with Charity Water that helps, get water to Africa and these places where water is scarce or polluted. I was involved in Invisible Children in Coney 2012, which was combating the child soldier epidemic in Africa.
I remember that.
I was involved in Compassion International, which was all about orphans adopting. I adopted a child and paid for him for years. And most of that was around hunger. It's Compassion International is focusing on ending world hunger.
Right.
And what I came to realize is all of these issues over time, they actually root on this core issue, that the water issue almost always links back to the water scarcity being because of goat farming or cow farming or this or that. All the places where the water crisis is happening, there's always a drip down effect or lack thereof of the overconsumption of water because of livestock. And same thing with child soldiers, the Coney 2012 epidemic that I was so all about. I came to find out that the war that was between Joseph Kony and the other tribes started over cattle land. They needed more grazing land.
Right.
Number 3, the hunger issue, Compassion International that I mentioned, like we could solve world hunger like that if we switch to more of a plant-based model than an animal-based, just from subsidies alone. We give so many millions, billions, trillions of dollars to animal subsidies because it's an inefficient system, and we give chump change to plant-based. If we flip that script, we could solve world hunger in like a year with that. And so, like you said, the right in front of us every day on our table is a choice that we can make that has real significant impact on a plethora of issues. And I'm of the firm belief that I always say this for the truthers out there that listen, and I know the analogy of the Matrix is overplayed a lot, but to me, this is the real red pill issue. Like everybody's talking about red pilling and waking up from the control system and the things that are creating the suffering on the planet. This is it. I really believe it's it. And I believe, going back to scripture, the scripture alludes to this, from the truth in the Garden of Eden to the prophet Daniel, who was enslaved by Babylon. Everybody always associates Babylon with civilization, with the Matrix, that, the Rastafarians like Bob Marley, they'd be like, oh, we got to escape Babylon. It's the control system, right? Well, Daniel, when he's enslaved by Babylon, what's the first thing that he does? He refuses the flesh on the table. He says, no, thank you. I don't want to eat your flesh. I'll just have vegetables and water, please. Vegetables, fruits, and water. And that whole book goes on to show how he's the most powerful adept. He raises the ranks in the kingdom, and he subverts the whole system and brings, the righteousness back. And it's because he made that choice in the very beginning. I truly believe it's all linked. So we can't control everything, but we can control this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's very few, unless you're a surgeon or some sort of doctor, there's very few times in your life where your decisions will result in life or death. And certainly there are no other situations where your decision could result in life or death for, I believe, for one person. Some thousands, I think it is. How many animals will one person be responsible for killing in a lifetime? I think it's like 7,000 animals. It is 7,000 animals that you personally, are responsible for the life or death of, and that's probably a pretty low estimate. That doesn't include all of this. This is probably direct. It's more referring to direct. I don't know where that number comes from, but anyway, it's thousands of lives that you directly impact or don't impact when you go to a supermarket. And of course, it is also not just your direct one person impact. It's about the collective impact as well, right? Because imagine if 20% of the world population makes that change, do you not understand the impact that would have on the industry? Like, it wouldn't just be the animals that you would have been funding specifically. It will be, everything would have to change. Like, everything would have to change. It would become too expensive. It would become too inconvenient. It would become, the whole system would collapse, and it would result in literally billions of animals being spared if we have massive, movement of people. So yeah, when you make these changes, it's not just about you and your individual impact. It's about that as well, which is, it's colossal. The amount, there's no other decision in your entire life that has the amount of potential that changing what you put on your plate and changing what products you buy has. Nothing comes close. It's wild.
Well, it's so enormous that people often mistake when I make content and I refer to the fact that there are 90 billion land animals killed every year in animal agriculture. But when you add fishes, it becomes trillions. And I say the word trillions. People are like, hey, man, read your script before you make your content. You said trillions. They can't even believe They can't even believe it. They can't even believe it. But here's the thing is 90 billion is crazy enough alone. That's 10 times the human population. That's like killing all of humanity 10 times over every year. But that's just the animals, right? We often forget about, as people who advocate for animals, we often speak from the animal's perspective, which is the most important thing, bar none. But to add to that, we have to remember the blowback on humanity from this for all the reasons we've already just discussed. But let's just focus on all the people who have to slaughter those animals. I mean, the horror right down the street from where I'm sitting right now. I'm in my Airstream that I am streaming from here. And literally right down the street in my hometown here is a slaughterhouse that kills, I think it's probably in the top 10 to 15 slaughterhouses in the nation, I think, the number of animals they kill. Right. And we interviewed one of the workers for Cowspiracy, and he's a prisoner on parole. So he's in this industry because he can't get any other jobs being a prisoner. Understandably so, but still they offer him this low, like 90 cents per day or something like that. 97 cents per day is as low as that to slaughter animals all day. I don't know. I can't remember what his criminal history is, but maybe he had a violent past. And so we're taking people who have violent pasts, we're forcing them in to work these jobs. And why? Why is it? Because no one else wants to do it. No one else wants to go slaughter animals all day. And so when we're paying and we're choosing to eat animals, everyone needs to really remember and think about that someone else is taking the brunt of that violence, and we know that studies have shown that suicide rates, drug abuse, spousal abuse,
social behavior and violence,
all of that is higher in these industries, and it's just tragic what we're doing to our fellow human beings because of this as well.
No, it's for sure. I want to, and before we jump back in again, I'll say one more thing, and then we are going to jump back in again. I'm gonna put you're at a ban. You can't respond to this. Okay. Okay. But no, for real. Just back to we quoted numbers: 90 billion animals, trillions if you include fish, and those numbers are. I just want to clarify and really put this out there. Those numbers don't mean anything, because who knows? I mean, I'm sorry. Can anyone imagine 500 of anything? No. So you can't imagine. What's a billion? What's a trillion? It doesn't mean a thing. And when you see trillions of animals, if you ever saw trillions or thousands, let's say, some people might have seen thousands. I've seen thousands. I've been in chicken farms, egg farms. I've seen thousands of chickens in broiler farms, meat chicken farms. I've seen thousands of chickens. I know what it looks like. It's shocking. In the scale of it is shocking. You look, wow, that's a lot of chickens, but it could also be a lot of footballs. You're shocked by the scale, right? But what really shocks you when you stop and you think, wait a minute. That's not just 1,000 things, though. Each one of these chickens, each one of these animals is an individual with an individual quirks, individual personality. They even look different from each other. They're not identical. People seem to think that all cows and all chickens and all pigs and all ducks, that they're just all carbon copies of each other. They're not. They're as varied as we are from each other. And you'll only see this just the same as some people who are like a little bit racist, let's say. They say something like, oh, all of people from this area look the same, right? But if you went and lived in that area, you would start to notice that they absolutely don't look the same. It's just because you're not used to looking at them, right? And noticing the differences. And a lot of people around the world point at the West and say like all white people look the same, for example, and we have this thing going between different countries, and it's kind of funny. And it's the same thing with animals. 1,000 chickens, you won't find two that are identical, and there won't be identical behavior. There won't be identical personalities. They'll have their own little quirks. They have their own little favorite places. They'll have their own, and especially if you go to a sanctuary where they can fully express themselves, where they can fully be in peace and calm, and actually not in just this horror and this horror show in a sanctuary where they can get peace. You see them, then they really express themselves. And some of them are shy, and they'll always be shy. And some of them come in there, and even though they've been through all this hell, they're extremely confident, and they want to hang out with people still, even though they've just been, exposed to this absolute horror of the factory farm, or even the small farm. And so, yeah, that's my point here. It's just to remember these are individuals when you think about this. It's a trillion, a billion. I mean, God, that's a billion someone's. It is mind-blowing when you put it into that perspective. That's why we're talking about this and the scale and the severity of it. When you really think about the individual, it is just absolutely horrific, like the worst thing in the world. Let's get back to this video and see what Charlie's, I think it's his last point here.
I just want to understand by what moral framework do you say it is immoral to eat the meat of something that is not human, especially if we get nutrients and we human beings are able to flourish?
Well, I would say, why are you against animal cruelty?
Well, first of all, no one wants to see something suffer unnecessarily.
Charlie makes a key. Okay, I think we'll jump forward here actually to what he says after this, because he's saying he doesn't understand what moral basis you have for he understands the moral basis to not eat humans. That was something he kind of made clear. But if they're not human, he doesn't understand the moral basis to not eat them. He asks him, why are you against animal cruelty then? Because no one wants to see them suffer unnecessarily. So I think we can just let that keep going, and then we'll respond after the point is done.
If and when you are able to derive...
Which he can. Well, why wouldn't he?
But if and when you are able to derive calories, nutrients, and I would also contest one of the other things, that I do believe we need animal-based protein. In fact, I think one of the main reasons, and maybe you're able to work it out, that young men are seeing such a dramatic drop in testosterone rates is the removal of animal-based proteins from diets, so young men especially, ages 10, 11, and 12, and replacement of a lot of these counterfeit soy-based, plant-based proteins.
So studies have found that with equal calorie and protein intake, there is zero difference between in testosterone levels between animal-based diet and...
Have you ever heard the term soy boy?
Okay, so we'll pause there. So he did a gish gallop there, and for those that don't know, gish galloping, you could call it tap dancing. It's basically happens a lot I don't know if you're not vegan or you've never kind of dealt with vegan circles and things and spoke with vegans, and you probably won't have seen too much of this, but as a vegan and as someone who speaks out about trying to get people to make changes for animals, I've seen this from day one, and now I've been doing this for like 6 or 7 years, and it's a lot of people do it. And I hope when I tell you about it, if next time you talk to a vegan, try not to do it, right? So tap dancing is basically, it's sort of, you start off with a point. He says, what moral basis do you have, right? Michael responds, the vegan responds to Charlie and says, well, why are you against animal cruelty? He says, well, I don't think we should make animals suffer unnecessarily, okay? But before we can really move into that point, he then starts to talk about nutrition and how if we derive nutrients from it, and then again he jumps onto another point now. Well, actually, I also believe that low testosterone is caused. So that's what tap dancing is. We were trying to get down to the point of why is Charlie against animal cruelty? Because that's where we're going to find out where the morals come from. That's what Charlie asked. He asked that question. Where do you derive your morals from? We need to dig. That's the tip of an iceberg. And instead of digging down into that iceberg, Charlie jumps to another iceberg. And then before we've even got to that one, he jumps to another iceberg, another tip. That's what tap dancing is. So try not to do that if you can. And everyone makes this mistake. I mean, it happens, but it tends to happen more when you're on the back foot and you just kind of want to shift off points that you feel won't go your way. It's not a nefarious thing. I think it's something we do as a defense mechanism. It's subconscious. It's more kind of, as things pop into your mind, you say them and you hope that one might work, or maybe this one will work. It's like you throw shit at the wall and see what sticks when you start to get on the back foot. So, but it's a bad habit, and it's a good thing to be aware of if you're ever having a debate with somebody, I would say. You agree on that one, Cam?
Yeah, totally agree. And then he topped it off with the soy boy joke, which again is more, I think, just that dispelling the tension of not having an answer or facing some kind of contradiction and not knowing what to say. And then a joke is a good way to just overcome that, in the room again, this kind of thing. But interestingly, again, not to hammer on Charlie because, again, all condolences and everything, but I find it, of course, he's heard what a soy boy is. Who hasn't at this point? It's kind of like a funny, like a weird joke anyways, to land it that way. But I know, and we don't even have to get into this because it's not really the scriptural God stuff, but there's so many people who are very, very masculine vegans, right? And Michael's one of them.
Yeah, Michael's one of them. He's like a body. Well, he's not a bodybuilder, but he's an athlete, and he's a masculinity coach. He trains and healthy masculinity. To be clear, he's super against like Andrew Tate and these types of people. He believes that's not masculinity. He says what that is a performative. It's performative masculinity. Like it's a fake thing. It's like a cartoonish version of masculinity, and actually that's the polar opposite of it. Like basically, he tries to teach his clients to be self-assured and confident in who they are, that they don't need to do that. They don't need to peacock. You know what I mean? Because peacocking is a sign of self-doubt. It's a sign of that you don't have high self-esteem. If you're always going around with a pumped-up chest like, I'm the man, it means that you actually are not confident in yourself and you're not masculine, actually. So that's what he teaches. He teaches people to, comfortable with themselves, speak firmly, speak confidently, be stoic. If try to, not let things affect you, don't get too carried away with things. Just it's almost, I see it as aligning with sort of Buddhist mentality in that, allow things to come and happen and pass and try not to cling to things that are good and try not to go into the depths when things get bad. Just try and stay nice in the middle, enjoy things when they're good and deal with things when they're bad. But don't lose your mind in either way. It's like that. That's what he talks about as. I think that's kind of what he refers to as like masculinity coaching. So it's almost like stoicism coaching or something along those lines. And so he's absolutely the guy to talk about being a soy boy. And I like what Michael mentioned there, and it is true. Like studies we've got the research now that testosterone levels are not impacted by eating only plants. It's not true. And actually, the most recent one, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the most recent one, it wasn't statistically significant, but it showed that the vegans in that study, I'm pretty sure the plant eaters in that study had a higher testosterone, but it wasn't statistically significant, which means that it's a very, very tiny amount more, so it doesn't really matter. But it's still interesting just as an observation to show that the vegans even tracked having higher testosterone in some studies, which is funny considering this popular narrative about this. So I think Michael did an awesome job, and that's actually, I believe that's the end of the biblical stuff. We'll let it play a little longer, but I'm pretty sure maybe there's one more point, but I'll let it play and we'll see.
Yes, of course. I am a soy boy. Yes.
You are a soy boy.
In terms of, that's what people call vegans. So yes, I am.
I didn't call you that. I just said, have you ever heard of the term?
Yes,
okay.
I've heard of the term, yeah.
Okay. The drop was seen. It's just like, that's what I mean. You can see it now that I've told you that Michael is a masculinity coach and it's very stoic. That moment right there was a great example of it, was it not? It's it's just very you very just bland and just boom, yes, okay. But he's not being sarcastic. That's kind of what he preaches. He's practicing what he preaches is, look, people make fun of you. Don't get upset. Don't get crazy. Just, stand there and stoic and okay. Are you done? Is it time for me to talk again now? I think that's a really good way of dealing with it. I would genuinely encourage, I know it's hard. Don't get me wrong. I know it's hard and not everyone can pull this off. But if vegans across the board could master this, I think we'd be a lot more of a, let's say, force to be reckoned with in debates and discussions and these sorts of things. And if we could just, keep that sort of not a cool head necessarily, because it's not about losing your temper. It's just this sort of steely determination, right? This sort of I have a point to make and you can play and you can gish gallop and you can make fun all you want, but I'm gonna stick at it, and I'm gonna get my point across when you're done.
Yeah.
Like,
I would have
that calm there.
I would have been tempted to ask him if he's ever heard of a dairy fairy. Just flip it on him.
Yeah. See,
I mean, that's the whole
yeah.
That's the whole thing. Is like soy is phytoestrogens, but dairy is literally real mammalian estrogen entering your bloodstream. So there's a whole inversion on that whole narrative, anyways.
Well, there's this. It's not like you've nailed it something there, man. Because this is not a new tactic. The industries. I mean, they've been doing this forever. They know how to do this. They know how to do propaganda. There's and it's they do something called accusation in a mirror. It's called. I think it's accusation in a mirror. It's a type of propaganda where basically you take the thing that is being said about you and you invert it, right?
Yeah.
Or you take the thing that is true of you and you invert it and put it on those that would accuse you of this. So in the case of the dairy industry, they're well aware that that milk contains real mammal hormones, like animal hormones, mammalian hormones, like us, mammals, right? They know that for a fact. And so what they do is, and I'm sure it came from them, and I'm sure this stuff comes from in the industries in some level. They go, okay, invert that and tell people that actually it's soy that's the problem and that has the hormones. And it almost kind of gets ahead of the curve because they can't like change milk that right now, at least. Maybe in the future they'll be able to make it. I don't know, but I don't know. It's the chemical formula of milk. It is what it is. That it is. That's literally why it is milk, is because it's meant to make a baby cow or a baby animal grow quickly. So it contains hormones for that reason.
Right.
And so, that's what they do. But look this up if anyone's interested. Accusation in a mirror. It's a really common propaganda thing. They've used it on the vegans' arguments quite a lot. I mean, that's one example of it. What others were? Oh, that's another one. Veganism kills more animals than non-veganism. That's one. So they inverted the truth again. And it clicks because it seems counterintuitive that people were like, they buy into it because it's the ultimate own of vegans, isn't it? We're always talking about, hey, look, stop killing animals, stop doing this to animals. And then someone comes along and tries to fudge the numbers and lie with statistics to try and show vegans kill more animals. I mean, you can't get a better slam dunk than that, can you? And that is sticking so hard, even though it's complete and utter nonsense. It sticks so hard. And it's so attractive to people, and it's such a good propaganda. I mean, I hate it obviously because it's a lie, it's misinformation, it's disgusting. But you've got to respect it because that is such intelligent propaganda that you're like, my God, like it's just if we vegans, we tend to be more honest, and we don't want to lie. We want to tell people the truth. But it's sometimes I do wonder, like, God, do we need to play their game? Do we need to come up with some brutally effective propaganda like they've been doing for all these years? Like the tobacco propagandists who moved over to the meat industry and they've been absolutely nailing it for all these years and convincing people of all this nonsense. And God, obviously I don't think we should ever do that, but it's rough, isn't it? We're really up against like proper lies, experienced liars that have been doing this for decades,
Yeah, totally. And you can see it happen. The animals killed argument, vegans kill more animals, that really gained popularity because of Ted Nugent on Joe Rogan when he had that viral clip. But then the funny thing is, I forget the guy's name. He's a really famous Hollywood screenwriter that wrote Yellowstone, the show Yellowstone. But he basically ripped that exact line from Ted and put it in Kevin Costner's mouth in the show. And then that screenwriter went on Joe Rogan and said that line again on Joe Rogan. And what's hilarious is the entire comment section, I remember seeing it, from a ton of people who weren't vegan or anything, were calling him out like, dude, you've just totally ripped Ted Nugent and just parroted his information in your show. And now you're doing it on Joe Rogan. So it's like, it's totally like a parroting effect too. It's sourced from somewhere and then it just propagates, like you said, but it's been refuted so many times.
The problem is, man, it's a comforting lie. And this is the problem. Look, with the video that we're looking at right now with Charlie Kirk in this video, I mean, you listen to the audience and what they do when they hear a comforting lie. Or not a lie, he's not lying, sorry. But in his case, he's not lying. He's just saying what he thinks, and what he thinks that they'll like as well, right? It's sort of, I don't think, I mean, I think some of the things Charlie said here were legit that he genuinely believes. I think some of the things he said because he wanted to get a good rise out of the crowd. And look, these debate formats that he does, and this is not even a proper debate, this is more like a speech type deal. But anyway, to get people to come back and get people to keep coming, he's got to make it entertaining. So I don't hate him for saying things that make people go and stuff. It's like, that's part of the game, right? It is what it is.
Yeah.
But in terms of Ted Nugent, in terms of this, the TV show, and in terms of the meat industry, the dairy industry, like they are straight up telling lies that have, I mean, there was probably nuggets of truth. Every good lie has a nugget of truth. That's how it's a good lie, right? So there's nuggets of truth to some of these things. Like, for example, the Ted Nugent thing, crop farming does negatively impact animals. It does kill animals. It does destroy habitats. That's true. Okay, so there's your nugget of truth. Now, and this is why vegans kill more animals, because vegans are the worst. And it's like, that's the lie. But it begins with a nugget of truth. And now that's a nugget of truth and a big lie, and it's a comforting lie, because everyone who's ever been made to feel guilty by a vegan, anyone who's ever felt guilty about eating meat, all of a sudden, I don't have to feel guilty anymore because Ted Nugent said this, and now I can send that when I feel bad, or I can think about that when I feel bad, and that makes me feel good. And so it sticks. It's very sticky, and people love it. And then when a vegan comes along and says, hey, look, just put 5 minutes of thought into this and you'll see why it's wrong, it's not sticky because it's undoing the comforting lie. It's an inconvenient truth. No one wants to hear it. And no matter how many times we say that there's no way in hell that you could say that farming crops to feed animals, then killing those animals is killing less animals than just farming the crops. That literally makes absolutely no sense. It goes against the laws of physics.
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at? It doesn't make sense. You spend 2 minutes on it and you already find out that, well, this is physically impossible. But that doesn't matter. It's not popular. It's not sexy. It's not comforting. So yeah, it doesn't, even if someone went on Joe Rogan and debunked it, it would just be boring. People would be like, yeah, I don't it's not going to go viral. Why would it go viral? It's not interesting. But if I go on Joe Rogan and I'm like, repeat that same thing again, it'll go viral.
Right.
100%. It sucks, man. It sucks. This has just become a struggle session now. You're just the agony aunt right now. You're just listening to me rant off about the things that are annoying me.
Yeah. Well, to lighten the mood, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a clip that went viral of a wheat farmer, I believe he was. I can't remember, but he lays down and lets his combine harvester run over him while it's harvesting.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, here we go, it's coming, yeah! And he's like selfing himself, and the combiner is just going over. Like, yeah, totally. Combine harvesters are just killing every rodent. It's hilarious. That's
also I've got to say it, because look, and this is the problem, man. Like, we get some good video like that, and we're like, oh, this backs our position.
There's some that are lower and some that do cause problems, dude. But it's like,
this is the problem. Like, I feel obliged to tell the truth, even when not telling the truth helps my cause. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we've got to be honest and like say he raised that thing up so it wouldn't get him. That, you know what I'm saying? So it's, we've got to be. But yeah, no, it was a funny video.
I did look it up. Just in general, combine harvesters do kill some animals, but the numbers have been overblown. It's more of the point of like, they actually do, because I did deep research after saw that video, because I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, there's got to be something to this. Like, is that actually? But I looked it up, and depending on the crop, there's multiple crops that the harvesters are like a good 3 feet off the ground while they're harvesting. So I'm just saying it's like that. I'm not saying it's not true that there are combine harvesters that do harm animals. I'm just saying that everybody in their mind pictures all combine harvesters just sucking up all this animal life, and that's just not true.
No, it's not true. It's not true. Yeah, of course, it's not. It's blown out of proportion. But it doesn't change that there are issues with it. But the thing that gets me is, with crop farming, it's like, hey, we need to fix the issues with crop farming because of the impact on animals, right? And people expect that vegans should, you vegans, that's what you should focus on because your lifestyles are still causing this and that and this and that. Don't look at me and don't ask me to change. Because your still causes this. And it's like, yeah, but you're also consuming those products for one, and for two, let's look at it realistically. Okay, do you really believe that we're going to succeed in getting massive industry level change in crop farming for the sake of animals before we get people to stop breeding, mutilating, and killing billions of animals for the sake of animals?
Right.
You understand? One will not come before the other. And it's ludicrous to imagine it will. To think that we could get people to care about a mouse that may or may not be affected by a combine harvester when they don't care about a pig, a cow, a sheep, or a chicken literally bred into captivity to be poked and abused and mutilated before eventually being sent off to a slaughterhouse as a baby to have their throat cut open. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that one of those will come before the other. You know, I think the only time where we can really say, like, okay, let's put a massive focus on crop farming and let's see if we can improve that, is when a sizable amount of the population has said no more animal farming. And then, you know, that's my kind of like list of like where I'm starting here. And if that happens in my lifetime, if we have a sizable amount of people that are like, okay, done with animal farming, maybe then I would start to spend some time talking about, okay, here's how we should improve crop farming as well. But it doesn't make to do that now would be like saying, I don't know, put it in a human context. It would be sort of like saying, okay, we're in World War II, okay, and here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to stop working on World War II because malaria is a big problem, and I think we need to fix that before we try and stop, you know, what the Germans are doing. It would be like, well, no, we have a priority here, and that takes top priority because for obvious reasons. I feel like that's how it is with animal farming. It is the number one priority for obvious reasons, and the other issues are still issues, even though that's the number one priority.
Yeah. And then building on that and adjacent to that, this is what you mentioned, having a large swath of people actually getting this potentially in your lifetime. This is why I still focus on, you know, my faith background and really trying to communicate this message and rebuttal these arguments like Charlie's been giving, is because one more point to all the people who maybe are atheists or just of a different religion or whatever, and think that it's not important. We should just be talking about these ethical arguments. We don't need to bring religion into it like someone like Charlie is or whatever. The fact of the matter is a third of the world is either Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, and that's all in that Western religious context with dominion and these Old Testament passages that we're talking about and everything. And it really has permeated our moral framework. And as someone who comes from that world and still professes and follows, you know, Jesus as a moral framework for myself, I think that it's imperative that we combat these misunderstandings that we've discussed today, because if Christians can fully get it and Christians can fully understand the implications of their actions and how it actually plays into the scriptures they know and love and what the truth of the narrative really is around animals, we could have a massive critical mass shift. Yep. And we've seen this happen before with the issue of slavery. Slavery is something that's been around from time immemorial, but the big swath of abolition that did occur, you know, and there's still more work to be done and all over the world in various areas. But that massive swath we all know about with the American slavery issue and everything was because the Christians finally stepped in and said, hey, wait a minute, I don't think that God or the scripture as we know it actually condones this. And the Christian abolitionists were the ones who, again, I'll be direct that it's very much Christians and Western religious people that helped enforce slavery as well. But that's why it's so important that we have people addressing these issues and talking about it within that framework, because it can really make real impact. And we've seen it happen with the slavery issue. And I believe that we truly can see it happen with the animal issue. And it's, again, not because we're overlaying a, you know, social justice warrior agenda on top of a Christian narrative or whatever. Not at all. I was raised as a Christian, and the only reason that I found my way to the understanding that I have around animals and respect for animals, compassion for animals, justice for animals, whatever way you want to frame it, is because I began to see scripture that painted a picture. There were contradictions, there were things, and through that process, studying it, going to biblical scholars, and then making this film Cowspiracy, I now know without a shadow of a doubt that the truth is that the original movement of Jesus, the Nazarenes, were a restoration movement trying to get back to the original quote unquote faith of the ancient Hebrews, which is what Judaism, Islam, and Christianity is all founded on. But it was lost through this priestly temple, animal slaughter, everything that Charlie's actually advocating for or referring to and using as a justification. Oh, in Leviticus, didn't they teach you how to kill animals and do it? All of that was what these earliest Nazarene followers of Jesus were combating. And I think it's imperative that the truth comes out. That's why I made Cowspiracy. Definitely. And it's time now that we have a mass awakening around the world around this issue.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Everyone should go to Cowspiracy.com to check that out, man. You can watch it for free still, right? It's still up there for free, Cowspiracy.com.
It's totally free. If you wish to contribute, we bought our rights back from Netflix, and we're just solely, marketing this thing and figuring it out. There is a pay it forward option. If you would like to contribute, you don't have to. But we did it that way so that we can, keep it free to the world as long as we possibly can. And you do get some fun perks if you pay it forward, like extended interviews and further access to more content. So yeah, super cool. Amazing. But go watch it for free by all means. If you can't afford it, just go. We made it that way for that reason.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. I will say one more thing about this debate. We're done with the biblical stuff we were going to talk about today. So that was the last biblical argument. There is one part of this debate. I mean, I could find it, but basically, just out of to be fair, Charlie does finish the debate by saying this, and I think it's very reasonable to put this up here. What's the word I'm looking for? Not reasonable. It's
amicable,
intellectually
good faith,
honest, in good faith, exactly. Yeah, and it's we have to be honest, and we have to put this, I think, because it's important that if people haven't seen it, that they see this. Where is it?
Let me interrupt.
You can eat mostly whole
the fact that we have to make Franken food, like Frankenstein.
No, not here. Sorry, it's way concern of yours. It's worth looking at the full food system, including meat.
That is only a small percentage.
I do want to thank you because we'll get to the next question. By the way, you guys, the line's over there. I see. What's going on? It is hard to take an unpopular position, and you've taken a very unpopular public position of which you should be commended.
I don't want to put. There you go. So, for all of the jokes and the arguing and for all of the silliness that there was only a couple of silly moments, and for the actual the disagreement and everything, at least he commends him for standing up and taking that difficult position, and I think that's I think it's important. It's important to show that. It's important that he did say that, and it's important for everybody who was there watching that Charlie does say that at the end and says, hey, look, it's a point of respect. In general, I mean, for me to summarize from you, Cam, and from everything you've said, I think it is obvious that Charlie hadn't ever thought about the biblical context in this way. I think if we're going to be charitable, I think that comes across very clearly, and I don't think that makes him some sort of dishonest person or some sort of bad person or anything like that in this case. I think, to be honest with you, well, I think I said this in the video too, or at least I've said it in posts since then. It just comes across very clearly that he knows the Bible and he knows Scripture, but he's never applied it when it comes to animals. He only knows the very top level stuff when it comes to animals. He digs deeper into other topics sometimes, and he seems to be able to recite Scripture and he knows the Bible really well for other stuff. But in terms of animals, he really didn't know the stuff. And who knows, one day, I mean, after a debate with you, one day he might have clicked with all of that, and who knows what could have happened, who knows the situation we could have ended up in, but unfortunately we'll never have that he'll never have that chance to dig into this, which is it's a real shame for, that's just one of the reasons it's a real shame, of course, but it's a shame that we'll never see that debate between you two.
Totally. And I again want to reiterate that I come from a similar place that Charlie's coming from here. In my past, I defended these positions in similar ways until I woke up to the truth. And in the same way, I have grace for myself up to that point because it was what I know. I have grace for Charlie in that, he has his own peers like Jordan Peterson, who, just like Charlie, didn't really even know what Genesis 1:29 was. He kind of skipped over that and thought it was about dominion. Right. Jordan Peterson recently put out his, newest book, We Who Wrestle with God. And he spends the entire first chapter orating on Genesis and drawing out all this mythological archetypical connections and how it applies to our daily lives. And he goes verse by verse of the entire book of Genesis. But then when it gets to verse 28, he skips to verse 31, and just totally omits the verse about eating only plants. And, obviously his daughter is heavy carnivore. She wrote the lion diet, the kind of the antithesis to the Daniel diet. And then he's been a heavy meat eater, carnivore advocate. And so we have this perpetuation of avoiding when we're even directly talking about the areas of scripture that should allude to some of these revelations. We skip over those parts. And in every way that often people like myself are accused of cherry picking, I throw that back and say, hey, look, we're cherry picking and we're not showing the whole picture here. And so Charlie is a product of that. He wasn't able to really, like you said, grasp this in his lifetime. And I'm totally saddened by the fact that literally I had plans to go talk to him. And just with that amicable ending, that good faith ending there, I definitely think there could have been a possibility. I've seen videos where Charlie changed his perspective on things. And even up to just before he was, his life was taken, he was changing and shifting his opinions on some stuff. Yeah. So who knows if he wouldn't have come to this conclusion at some point in his life.
You never know. I at least hope that, as that can no longer happen, I would at least hope that some of Charlie's fans and, supporters of his work who find this video, I would hope that on his behalf that you go into this, that, you do what you would have hoped he would have done. Like, okay, go into this, try and prove Cam wrong, try and prove me wrong. And I don't mean, I would love for you to change right now and start changing for animals right now. But obviously you need to know that what we're saying is true. So I implore you to come along and look into what we've both said, have deep thought about it. And what I think you'll end up doing, whether it be in a biblical context or just, listening to what I've said in a more practical sort of, I don't know, practical, I suppose, less biblical way, like a non-religious way, whatever way you find yourself, I think, what we're saying, we're not trying to win arguments. We're not trying to beat you into submission with philosophy or whatever. We're just trying to get things changed for animals. We're trying to move the needle. We're trying to make a better world for animals. And I really don't see, apart from people out there who are just, just to be frank, kind of nasty and motivated by being vindictive and things like that. Apart from those types of people, like if you've got a good heart and you're a good person and you want to do good for the world, you want to be good to other people and good to animals, I really don't see why you would argue with this, and I don't see how you could while maintaining that you are a good person who wants to do good, who's well-meaning and all those things. I think most people fall into that category. Most people I've met do. And so I really hope that you would take this on board and that you would go into this and dig deeper into it and start making these changes. And before we finish, we're just going to go through a couple of messages we've had, some super chats, some donations. Thank you everybody who's done that. The first one we had was a recommendation from, this comes in from Be the Bigger Being, who I said, I recommend a Christian, vegan / vegetarian YouTuber, Reformers Flame, aka Mashiach Ben Dan. He was talking about the Cowspiracy stuff before the documentary came out and teaches people about the vegetarian messages in Christianity. Was Paul veg or anti-veg? Paul was anti-veg, right?
Yes, and that's a whole other rabbit hole. But I will say, we'll save that for another video, probably, because I can go off. But I will say, even though Paul was anti-vegetarian, because he was in opposition to James the Just, the own brother of Jesus, and the other followers who were, and we have tons of attestation for that. Literally, Eusebius says that all the 12 apostles only ate vegetables and abstained from flesh. It's historically documented. It's irrefutable. But Paul was trying to bring the message to the wider world, the quote-unquote Gentile world, right? The Greeks and the Romans, and they were eating tons of flesh. And so he was coming up against communities trying to spread the message and trying to give like concessions for them to do that. And it wasn't jiving with the rest of the movement. And therefore he clashed. But to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, in Colossians, even Paul does say, I will never eat flesh again if it causes my brother to stumble, because he's acknowledging his brothers of the faith who believe that we shouldn't be doing that. But applied to today, just like I was saying, when you've got literal prisoners on parole killing animals all day so that we can have, meat or flesh to eat. And they're getting all of this PTSD and everything from it. That's definitely, I would say, a means of causing your brother to stumble. So I think even Paul's words apply to a fleshless diet in that sense.
Right. Cool, man. Super interesting, dude. You know so much about this stuff. I love it. We've got another comment from Lee Richardson. What's up, Lee? He said, some people in militaries adopt a vegan diet, a whole food plant-based diet to improve health so they perform better. So their focus is better and their stamina is better and they recover faster. And he also followed that up by saying Tulsi Gabbard adopted a vegan diet in the military. Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt it. I'm sure some people do that. I don't know how widespread it is, to be totally honest with you, but it makes sense. I mean, the thing is with another benefit of eating plant-based in the military would be that it's easier. I believe it's easier to keep the food good, right, without it going off. Because I don't know where you're based or what your situation is, but if you have no power and no refrigeration and things like, all animal products are done like immediately. Basically, they become unsafe to eat. Whereas there's a bunch of plant foods can be just there and dry. Like really nutritious plant foods, like, your lentils, your beans, and all your different grains and stuff. They can just be in storage dry. And if there's no moisture, they can be there for years even. So, yeah, it probably makes more sense in that. And they're nutritious and, good for you. And you'll be able to not have that risk of getting bloody food poisoning or worse. People have died from eating animal products that have been left in the warmth for a little too long. So that doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Totally. Funny story around that. When I first went vegetarian, when I was young, I did this Daniel fast. It's in the movie Cowspiracy. But then at a certain point after that, when I decided to stick and stay vegetarian at first, I was doing a paddle trip down the Savannah River from my hometown, Augusta, Georgia, all the way to the ocean, which is like a 5 or 6 day paddle in a canoe with my friends. And we all brought MREs, meals ready to eat, the military grade, food that are in those packages. And I bought a bunch of vegetarian ones so that I could stick to my thing. And I knew, I was like, man, I'm going to be, because it was early on my journey. I'm like, man, I'm going to be tempted to eat. And sure enough, within like 2 days, my friends got so sick from the non-veg MREs that I was like, yeah, man, I picked the right choice. And it helped instill a lot of my, will to continue.
Yeah, dude, the story didn't go that way, but that's really funny that happened. But there was a risk of this happening. So when I did Everest Base Camp, did the Everest Base Camp hike, and I did it with one of the first vegans to ever actually summit the mountain. His name's Kuntal Joysha, legend. And he was leading our tour group. And he told people at the beginning, he said, listen, I'm a vegan, ethical reasons. That's why I'm a vegan. However, I do not recommend any of you consume any animal products any point past our first point, basically, our first stop. The reason is they take them up the mountain, and it's slow, and the animal products are, they're out in the open in a bag or whatever, but they're in the elements, right? They're not cooled down, there's no fridges, and they have to, some of these places, they're carrying them for days, and it's just super dangerous, all right? And everyone was like, that's a really good point. Yeah, it could ruin your trip. You've spent a lot of money. You've spent a lot of time training. This could ruin your trip, so it's best you don't do it. And there's a bunch of plant-based food up here, and it's super tasty, and you'll be fine. All good, sweet. And I'm telling you, in our group, pretty much everyone stuck to it, but there were 2 people, they just couldn't. They just refused to do it. And it blew my mind. It's like, you're halfway up a mountain. If you get sick, you're going to have to take a chopper home, right? Yeah. Or be carried down the mountain. It would be brutal. It would be expensive. It would be horrific. When you get food poisoning, it's like the world is over for you. And yet they still couldn't do it. They still refused to just not consume animal products. And we're talking like a 4 or 5 day journey, 4 or 5 days, and you couldn't do it. It blew my mind, man. So yeah, I mean, they didn't get sick, thankfully, because it would have ruined everyone's trip. But it's just mind-blowing to me. I remember looking at them and being like, are you guys for real? You can't manage a couple of days without eating some animal product, even if it's likely going to make you sick. Like, there's a really high chance it'll make you sick halfway up this trail. Mind-blowing, dude.
Yeah, the Bible calls this the lust of the flesh. A lot of people assume that just refers to like a sexual immoral behavior. But interestingly, when you look at Numbers 11, there's an account of when the Israelites are in the desert after they've been freed from Egypt and crossed the Red Sea, the whole Moses story, right? There's an account that a lot of people who actually go to church probably know that quail fall in the desert and the Israelites eat it. And people will use it to justify like, well, you know, the Israelites ate quail in the desert and it seemed like it was from God and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you need to read the Numbers 11 account, because the way Numbers accounts for this story, they go to the desert and they're all like what you're describing. They're in this wilderness and they're complaining to Moses saying, oh man, back in Egypt, we had all this meat. Like, I'd just rather go be enslaved again so I can eat my meat, my fish, and blah, blah, blah. And Moses is like, God's angry about this. And he says, you know what? You're going to get meat. Quail are coming to fall all around the camp. And you're not just going to eat it for 1 day, 2 days. You're going to eat it's going to be so much meat it comes out of your nostrils, it says. And so up to that point, they were eating totally just plant-based. But because they were lusting after the flesh, they eat it and they all get sick and over a third of the camp dies. And then they named the location in the desert the Hebrew word, which means those who lusted after other food. So Dude, it's funny because people come at me. I have a video on my Cowspiracy YouTube channel where a guy at a debate at a college is like, well, didn't God provide quail in the desert? And I'm like, why don't you just read that passage again? And I get him to read it on camera. And at the end, he goes, all right, man, I'm going vegan. All right. Like, it clicked for him.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, it's awesome. I'd love to see you get out there and do more of that kind of outreach. It was really cool to see you do that with the Trump guys that time. That would be really cool to see you do more of that. Especially There's now, I think there needs to be good dude. I think there needs to be someone out there spreading a message of love and hope and compassion right now, because things seem pretty wild over there for you guys. And what happens with you guys affects the rest of us, so sort it out. So we had a super chat from Kritim, who he sent the super chat in a different message, but like this is the message he wanted to say. I request you to check Arvind, animal activist. He's organizing a debate with content creators who have massive following. This will take veganism to mainstream in India. Love to see you react. Thank you, Kritim. I'm good friends with Arvind. He's a legend. I've been following his journey with all these debates and stuff. It's super interesting. I've had a little sneak, not peek, but I've had some information from the inside on how it's all going and stuff, and I'm not allowed to say anything, but yeah, I'm very excited to see Arvind release these debates, and I'll for sure do some reactions when it happens. Thanks for being here, man, and thanks to everybody for donating. And I think that's all. That's all the super chats. Thank you guys for all the super chat donations. They're all going straight to the sanctuary, as well as the ad revenue from this video will go straight to the sanctuary. Kurza Lapka looks after disabled ducks, disabled chickens taken from rescued from farming. And they're truly incredible. It's Kurza Lapka. Maybe Annie can put the link down there in the comments. If you want to go to their Instagram and check it out, you'll see little ducks, disabled ducks in wheelchairs, because that's what they do for them, so they can move around and so they can experience walking as a duck again, because they've lost the ability to walk because of various problems that they had in these farms. So truly incredible people doing incredible work for these animals, and thanks to you lot, they're going to get a couple of extra euros, dollars, pounds, whatever it is. It's zlota. Sorry, it's Polish zlota. That's what they're going to get. Some zlotas. But yeah, so thank you, Cam, for being here, man. Everyone, go check out Cowspiracy.com. Go and check out Cowspiracy here on YouTube as well. That's not Christ Piracy, as some people get it mixed up as. That's Cowspiracy, like conspiracy, but Cowspiracy. So yeah, you can check that out here on YouTube. He's got some great videos that he's made there. And of course, his documentary is free to watch at Cowspiracy.com. Again, thanks, Cam, for being here, man. You've smashed it. Any last words from you before we sign off? Say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah, man, just thank you for having me. There's so much more to be said on these topics. So yeah, everybody follow along on what we're doing over at Cowspiracy. Hopefully we can have more conversations about it. But for those of you that want to discredit it right away because you're thinking about this thing or that thing, probably I've covered it in another video. So just go down the rabbit hole, or just go down the rabbit hole for yourself. I truly believe that the truth is like a lion. It will always win. And So on that note, last thing I'll just say is, again, my condolences about anyone who's affected by this Charlie thing, and just know that this is all in the spirit of keeping the message of debating and sharing ideas and scrutinizing these ideas alive. And I really appreciate my life. I appreciate that we're all, here just able to have the breath to even do this. And so, I just didn't want to end it without a reminder about the fragility of life of all beings. And I truly hope and pray that violence on this earth continues to get scrutinized and minimized through these types of conversations.
Amazing, man. I'll let you have the last word there. That was amazing. Incredible work. Thanks everybody for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. Please share it if you did. And Cam, thanks again. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.